Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today is Tuesday, June 20th, and the Board of County Commissioners has just finished a working lunch and jail tour, and now we're getting back to business. And we're starting with department updates and board membership reports. And do we go right to board membership reports? I guess we do, because we're the only ones that are here. So,
Well, Francie's here.
well, she's on the board. Francie will be remote today. Hope you're feeling okay over there, Francie.
Okay.
Steve has left us, so I don't know if we're going to see him until maybe later, if at all, today. Patty, do you want to just jump into your board membership report?
Sure. ACRA, Food and Wine. It was great. Great event. Kelly, thanks for coming to the luncheon. It's always fun at the Hotel Jerome. It's amazing the great job that ACRA does. We have a meeting coming up on the 27th, so they are closely watching the airport. Just wrote a letter of support for the aviation forecast, which I thought was very nice of them to do. So they are paying close attention to that. Economic Development in Northwest Colorado Council of Governments. We have not had a meeting. We don't meet again until July. And the Intermountain TPR, I heard some interesting information on one of the public radio stations about, I need to talk to Brian Pettit, he has been out of town, about this new money coming through from the state, but none of the people asking for it didn't have any of their projects on the list for our Intermountain TPR. So there's been some issues. Well, now you're asking for the money. What about the people that have already been on the list? So I'm going to follow with Brian and see how they're going to opt to use that money, if they're going to put it into first come, first serve, or if they're going to try and split it up, because I know Garfield County wants some other funding issues, and I think Silt wants some for their intersection of I-70. So I think Brian and I and Linda will be keeping an eye on those funds. But for me, that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, Francie, are you up? Do you want to do any board reports?
I have no board reports, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to Kelly then, if you're ready.
Sure. So I will follow up on our most recent meeting with APSHA, where we pledged $200,000 for grants up to $10,000. So they are going back to the city to kind of bring our counter proposal for that program, and hopefully I'll have more news after Wednesday. We appointed our community alternate, Peter Grenny. He'll start this week. I did receive some feedback with concerns about that, so we'll just.
Now, did the city appoint? The city appointed him?
They did.
Okay.
They did. Yes, Peter is a part of the Aspen Deserves Better coalition, and so some of the concerns I had received were related to being very critical to housing, but maybe not having shared that as much during our interview with him. So anyway, I think he is a critical thinker, and look forward to having our full APSHA board resume. CCI, we had our CCI conference the end of May. I thought that there were some really great seminars and some, lesser great seminars, which is always the case at CCI. A lot of catharsis from the conservative parts of the state about the housing bill, the statewide land use bill. So it will just be interesting to resume from that. There wasn't really any productive direction coming out of that meeting. Then what else? Also discussion about this tax ballot measure. I think we need to get our hands wrapped around that a little bit. Proposition HH, that will be going to the ballot and will affect how property taxes are implemented in the years coming forward, and how backfill will be recovered by communities, et cetera. I think it's very confusing, and it also runs into a other piece of legislation, the number of which I'm forgetting, 231, I think, which got passed by the legislature prior to the Prop HH getting sent to the ballot, and how they might interact if HH passes or doesn't.
It sounds like there was a lot done at the last minute and too late for us to figure out taxes.
It is. It really is very confusing. So I'm not going to try to explain it in this, but we should probably set up some work session time to better understand it. And that's about it. Not a lot going on the legislative front. I will say at the Colorado River Basin Roundtable meetings, I'm starting a sidebar conversation with some of the other members of that organization about perhaps writing some criteria for grant making related to grants for private ditch companies, because we just seem to like approve these things without the community really garnering a whole lot of benefit from it. And it's never clear kind of what the finances of the ditch companies are, what the status of the repairs needed are, why they've fallen into disrepair. And then we don't try to kind of add some conditions related to, well, those efficiencies should benefit the river health, in any way. And so I've been talking with April from Ruwapa and kind of put the bug in the ear of some of the roundtable members about trying to have some better criteria around that funding. And
Kind of like what we learned at that request for funding for the ditch on Red Mountain.
yeah. And, if water efficiency is good, but is there more to gain here when this is all benefiting public money benefiting private landowners? I mean, there's even issues about whether they're required to be transparent about their finances, so there's a lot wrapped up in that. As I understand it, because there was so much money sort of thrown at water stuff lately, they just wanted to push the money out the door, but I think we should be a little more critical. And then the CJCC, we all just did the tour of the jail over our lunch break to see upgrades for the current jail related to bringing back our inmates this summer. And I don't know when our next CJCC presentation will be to our board. But anyway,
Don't think we have
that's
that
what that's
scheduled.
And
That's
then
it?
I'll just report quickly on Wild and Scenic. We have our next meeting of the Wild and Scenic Feasibility Collaborative Thursday night in Marble, where the steering committee of 25 people has been designated. I think it's a very balanced group of people. So we'll have that conversation with the steering committee led by our facilitators in Marble on Thursday.
And if anything, the crystal right now is wild and scenic.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question about it. So anybody who questions whether or not it should be wild and scenic should go see it. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, hey Kelly?
Yeah.
I thought that the city had passed the $100,000 for APSHA's maintenance fund.
They did, but we doubled the grant amount. Remember,
I thought they had repassed it after we had doubled it.
I didn't think so, but I can confirm.
Okay,
Thanks, Francie.
thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's see, my list. First of all, something I've noticed for the last 7 years, my name is spelled improperly on this, and I always think it's kind of funny, but it's been about 7 years. Thought, well, should I bring it up? Oh, what the hell.
I get hyphenated.
We
Right.
changed it years ago, don't you remember?
Yeah, I know, we switched it, and I didn't get the notice. CC Forcier, I don't have anything new to report, other than that they put a lot of effort into the policy changes every year, and it takes a consensus, unanimous vote of the entire 42 or 43 member board to change anything in their bylaws. So to me, being somebody who's not really good at that, I get very frustrated in how pedantic and tedious that is, but they've done a policy update. But they're doing great work with lobbying on behalf of us, and when something else comes up, I'll be sure to let you know, because I'm often called upon to testify or write a letter, and I can share that with the board when it's appropriate. CORE will be with us, talking to us today, so I'll save that for later. Northwest Cog QQ is going to be meeting on this Friday, the 23rd, in Aspen, so they'll be
Here
here.
at the library.
And we have some presentations. April Long's doing one, and I can't remember who else, but that's going to be starting, I think, at 10 a.m. on Friday in the Dunaway room at the library. Board of Health hasn't had a meeting lately. I did notice that Board of Health members are supposed to take a state seminar to meet statutory requirements, and I haven't done mine yet. My
I haven't
training.
done mine either, I just happen to
Yeah,
have
I know.
time.
So we're remiss, and Patty and I are in the doghouse right now on that, but we will correct that. RAFTA, everything's going well at RAFTA. We had our board retreat for RAFTA last week. I'm trying to think of something new to tell you. I guess the sense of optimism, the RAFTA board always puts climate action at the top of the list. And that permeates virtually everything else RAFTA does, from transportation to housing. The housing is coming along well with the purchase of the hotel in Glenwood that's being repurposed. And I guess the important thing to say about RAFTA is that the succession plan is being designed and implemented. Dan Blankenship, who's been with RAFTA for 35 plus years, will be retiring probably in the next 2 or 3 years. We're keeping it open-ended. He's had a great career there, and he's doing a good job training his replacements. We've got 2 candidates from in-house that have been positioned by the RAFTA board to prepare them and hired for that purpose, and so that's moving along well.
Is he gonna be a bus driver?
Yeah, maybe he'll become a busman's holiday,
Hey,
right?
Greg, you forgot they did the ribbon cutting on the 27th Street.
On the 27th Street Bridge, ribbon cutting, that's true, that
Friday.
happened. The week before that, they had the fiber optic cutting.
Yeah,
And
very good, Greg. Oh, I set you up perfectly for that.
thank you for that. I'll give you your $5 now. And then yesterday, I attended a seminar regarding workforce, and workforce has been on my list of board reports for 7 years.
I know,
I think you dumped it on me 7 years ago. I went to a meeting yesterday with the workforce people in Carbondale. It was a meeting of some electeds and leaders of various entities in the valley for a thing called the Career Connected Learning System Design, and it's the first inspirational get-together with a facilitator out of Colorado Springs to start figuring out how to create pathways for students leaving our high schools to get into the workforce. It turns out that down valley from Aspen, over 50% of the kids do not go to college or do not stay in college after the first year. And a lot of them are looking for work, and it's been determined that wouldn't it be great to tee them up for jobs in the valley. And so this group will be meeting, and I'm sure we're going to hear more. I was invited down by Ben Baumfock, who's now the director of outreach or something like that for the Roaring Fork Schools, and I think he's also the mayor of Carbondale. And it was actually really fascinating that we had people there from Habitat and people there from all the schools and ACRA and elsewhere. Debbie Braun was there. So that was an interesting meeting, an eye-opener just about what workforce needs are. And CORE attended as well. Dallas was there. There were like 30 people in the room. And that went on today as well. So we'll hear more from them. Finally, let's see, Forest Service, all I can say is that we did get a letter from Joe Wells regarding the dying Douglas fir on Little Annie in the backside of Aspen Mountain. And it turns out there is a pheromone treatment which would have to have been done in April, and it's on Forest Service land, so it's a question mark whether they would do anything or not. But we are seeing more incidents of Douglas fir dying, and I'm not sure the Forest Service would do anything because it may just be a life cycle question for them. But we are seeing more, between the pine beetles, now the Douglas fir beetle coming in. That's all I've got for you. Thanks. John Ely, do you want to talk about River District?
Well, I'm glad I saw my name.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, every time my name has been on for the River District the entire year, 2023, I've been in a meeting with the River District.
Today you got done with your meeting with the
So,
River District.
yeah, so now I'm done with the meeting for today. Well, I'll mention one thing that occupied quite a bit of time with the district and their discussions, and that's an effort of the UCRC, which is the Upper Colorado River Basin Commission. And it is a systematic conservation program that the commission is getting ready to implement. And it started off with a $8 million budget, and that quickly inflated with infrastructure funding to $125 million over a 4-year period. And the idea is that the UCRC will use this money to pay agricultural irrigators to stop irrigating their land and do so on a voluntary basis, hopefully in a basis that's fairly compensates the irrigators for relaxing the use of their water rights, and the key thing is a temporary basis. So the plan was not initially thought out that well, and I thought it was great because they were just going to pay senior rights holders a lot of money to dry up some land, and the water would be grabbed by the junior rights holders, and they would use that water to irrigate their land. So it would come at a real, infusion of cash for a few people with very senior water rights, and everybody else would benefit in the state. There wouldn't be much money or much water that was actually conserved because it would be picked up and utilized before it flowed to the state line. The UCRC got a lot of buffeting and sort of some nasty borderline comments on the way the plan was set up. And so they retooled it a bit. And they found a way that they could shepherd the water actually out of Colorado once it was left in at the point of diversion under the existing decree. The idea is, at the end of the day, the UCRC would be able to demonstrate that by paying people to forego irrigation, water would not be consumed within the state and would actually flow out of the state and end up in Lake Powell and eventually Lake Mead, which is all well and good, except that what they're really demonstrating is if you dry up West Slope agriculture, somebody else will benefit from that water. And the other beneficial rights water holders that would be benefit is primarily Metro in Southern California. And it's somewhat of a shame, but when you look at this government-funded effort coupled with similar investment strategies in the private market, it really paints a bleak picture for West Slope Ag and its viability, at least in the long term. And it makes you wonder just how much we can do to try to preserve it. And not only that, but all the economies that spin off from agriculture and the way of life that it promotes, and the whole idea of locally grown food. So anyway.
What about weed management?
Weed management?
If you're not irrigating, you're going to have more crops of noxious weeds.
That's a fact.
Hey, John, does the conversation ever go toward, looking at economies and countries that have always had severe water issues and creative irrigation and agricultural I'm thinking of Israel or, places that...
Or Australia.
Australia, where they simply have never had the water and they've had to deal with it, and somehow they're productive. Is it time to start looking at that and proposing it somehow?
Kind of interesting. My personal experience is that dialogue was going on at a kind of a hot and heavy pace, maybe 15, 20 years ago. Now you don't hear too much about it. Now you hear different ways to allocate water, to reapportion it, to resequence it or retime its availability, but it's always from one consumer to another, and typically from some upper basin consumer to a lower basin consumer in the case of the Colorado.
Efficiencies don't play into it as much.
Yeah, efficiencies are always in the background, but never in the foreground. It's interesting.
And does other countries have water laws and compacts like we do? That's one of the
They
problems.
issue edicts.
They, yeah, right.
Yeah.
They're managed nationally, actually. So
Yeah.
they're much more centrally oriented. so they're not pitting
Look at the
one
bigger
region
picture
or-
than my own backyard picture.
Yeah. It's, yeah, well, I mean, Australia is a great example. Israel's a little off just because they do so much desal. And
Right.
with the desalination is just not available to everybody in the West, except, folks on the West Coast. Exactly. Otherwise, you wouldn't have access to salt water to desalinate it. But Australia is a great example, really. And then, of course, as the climate changes and gets worse and worse, there are other great examples that sort of pop up and grab your attention for a brief interlude before they slide into the static and the background news stories. And anyway, I thought I would mention that. for my
Thank you for
update.
that.
Francie is laughing at you, John. She's not laughing at us.
I'm laughing with him.
I hear you.
Did, the compact negotiations discussion, do we know if they had agreed to expand the EIS to include the most recent proposed approach for that? I thought that's where
I'm not sure where that
Colorado was
is.
sort of waiting.
I'm not sure where that is right now. The district is getting together with representatives of the CAP, the Central Arizona Project, which is an interesting mix. And of course, the most pitched battle right now is Arizona versus California. It seems to always come down to those two locations. California is winning.
California just signed on to the conservation part of it, though.
Yeah, no,
They're
California
not
does.
sure how far they're gonna go, but they signed on.
Yeah, they're trying to do their part, at least from a
They got enough pressure.
superficial kind of observational, thing. Nobody does as much as Vegas. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that's a
they're really
that's a
jumping.
widely admitted fact that Vegas has done more for water conservation than anybody else on the big river.
I told my family if they don't start conserving water, I'm not gonna send them anymore.
That's right. I know. Whenever I talk to folks, hey, how's the water tasting?
Yeah, I know. I do remind them of that too, and we don't have to say it in public.
Yeah.
I did
But-
take some pictures in Vegas of they have all these flags about encouraging people to do turf replacement and
They're
things like
funding
that
it.
all over.
They're
Yeah.
giving people incentives, cash incentives.
That's great.
Yeah.
Somebody told me the other day, you could get out on the water in Lake Mead, and when you came back in the afternoon, the water had already risen.
Well, and the stories coming out of Powell
lot of water.
are just as dramatic, that, 10 feet of elevation gain in one day.
Yeah, it's
you know,
huge.
What?
Yeah, it's huge, and that's a big lake to be filling.
No kidding. I'm not sure if those reports are necessarily accurate, but it's definitely
He
a
said you
ton
could
of
see
water
it from
going
where he
in.
went in the water in the morning and came out in the
Oh,
afternoon.
yeah. But 10 feet over the surface area of Mead or Powell is
Yeah.
just a phenomenal.
Said you can't see any of those bodies anymore in Lake Mead.
Okay, thanks for that. We should move along. We're behind schedule. I've already got us 12 minutes behind schedule, Francie. We miss you. Let's get into the Transitional Housing Capital Campaign for Pitkin County Partner Organization response. And we've got people on deck.
When are we housing that new one?
Hopefully soon. Sooner than later. August.
July 31st is a great date.
Hopefully. Hopefully that's the day.
That's my birthday.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. It's on. Sounds like it's on. So, should we get started? Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Lindsay Maish, Director of Human Services. I'm mostly here just to introduce one of our integral partners here with Human Services. You may have heard of Response before. They're a domestic violence, sexual assault resource center here in Pitkin County. And right now, Shannon Meyer, who's the executive director of Response, is working on a capital campaign. And really what I wanted to say before I let her take the reins and introduce this project to you all is just, we've done a lot of work in human services around homelessness in the last few years, and realize that the housing initiatives that Response has been doing have been absolutely integral to making sure that our homeless population is not much bigger than it is today. So this project is really important to us for a few reasons. Obviously, we overlap with our child welfare, abuse and neglect in that area, and really make sure that our kids are safe. Together, we work that way. But also that this is filling a very critical need for us in a transitional housing space that if we didn't have it, I would hate to see what that would look like for us in our community. So that's my way of teeing up the presentation for Shannon, and I'll let you introduce yourself
Fabulous.
and the project.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yep.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Awesome.
Yeah.
So as Lindsay said, I'm Shannon Meyer. I'm Director of Response and have been with Response for 5.5 years. Have lived in the Valley for 24 years. So been around for a long time, but relatively new in this space. The Response, however, has been around for 40 years. This is actually our 40th anniversary year, which is really exciting and great time for us to be embarking on this campaign. Our mission is to work with the community to end domestic and sexual abuse and to support survivors in achieving their own safety and empowerment. So we're actually the only organization in the Upper Roaring Fork Valley serving survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, stalking, and human trafficking. There is Advocate Safe House Project that operates in Garfield County, but we serve survivors that live, work, and visit the Upper Valley. So our service area is technically that little slice of Eagle County and Pickens County, but we also serve about 20% of our clients who work in the Upper Valley and live in Garfield County. We have 5 full-time staff and 3 part-time staff. All of our services are offered in English and Spanish, and about 40% of our clients are from the Latinx community, all up and down the valley.
Did you say 40%? Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
One of the things that I often hear talking to some people in the area is that, oh, domestic violence doesn't happen in our community. And my response to that is it happens to 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men nationally. Why would it be any different here? So 1 in 3 women experience some form of domestic abuse, and 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men experience some form of sexual assault or harassment in their lifetimes as well. 50% of all women and men in the U.S. will experience some sort of psychological aggression by an intimate partner. So domestic abuse can be psychological, emotional, financial, and of course physical. In 2019, we started a Housing for Survivors program. I started Response in November of 2017, 15 days after the Me Too movement launched again. It was a pretty crazy time to be entering this field. And I realized that we only could provide 3 nights of emergency housing to survivors at that time. And that wasn't even a Band-Aid on their situations. You know, if someone was in crisis in the middle of the night and the police called us, we can put them up for the night. But after 3 days, where were they going to go? And for that reason, I applied for and got our largest ever federal grant, and then got that matched by our largest ever private grant to start our Housing for Survivors program. And one of the reasons, that looking at those facts up there, is that the fear of losing safe and affordable housing is one of the top reasons that a victim won't leave their abuser. And domestic violence is the leading cause of homelessness for women and children specifically. So the housing program that we started back in 2019, we started small. You know, we didn't want to just jump right into something without a proof of concept. So it was really a pilot program. We continued our emergency shelter, 3 nights in local hotels, and that's donated to us by a lot of wonderful hotels here in Aspen, which is amazing and continues today. But we added in transitional housing. That we started by providing in apartments that we rented around the valley. So we would rent an apartment for a year, and we could put survivors into there, survivors and often their kids as well, for up to 3 months, while they worked with our housing program manager to find longer-term housing solutions, to save up money, to move into a place, various other things that they were working on, improving their employment skills, fixing their credit, things like that during that time. So it gave them a 3-month period of time to get them back on their feet. And then the third tier of the housing program is long-term rental assistance, flexible funding that could be used either once someone came out of transitional housing to help them first and last month's rent. A lot of times survivors have no savings, their credit's been destroyed by their abuser, having that boost to get them into housing. For some people, they would need just a decreasing amount of rent over up to a year to get them back on their feet. Some people just needed $300. Some people needed the full $5,000 we allocate. So that's why it's really flexible funding. So with the transitional piece, we had the one apartment. I think about 4 months later, we're like, we need another one. We rented a second. The year after that, we rented a third. In the summer of 2004, we needed a fourth. We had a waiting list for our housing all the time. And for us, a waiting list is not, you're hanging out somewhere great, waiting to move into somewhere free. You're in an abusive home, waiting to be able to escape. So we went out in search of a fourth unit, could not find one to rent. Wasn't even really a question of finances. It was more just the competition for housing. If you could rent to a dual income family with rental references versus renting to us, and we would say, we're not going to be able to tell you who's staying in your place because that's confidential. We were striking out. So we ended up buying a place in 2021 so that we had 4 units for about 6 months, and then we lost one of our rented units. And at that point, so that was last summer, I went to the Board of Response. I said, we have proven this concept. We've proven that we have the demand. We've proven that we have the skill set to work with survivors and get them into housing independence. But we have maxed out our capacity with this. We, as you saw in your packet, we had 17 survivors and 17 kids in our units last year, but we had to turn away 13. So we said, now is time for us to pursue building a shelter in the valley, the first ever domestic abuse shelter in the upper Roaring Fork Valley. So numbers-wise, last year we served 171 survivors. 56% of those clients were in Pickens County, so 96. We answered almost 300 calls to our 24-hour crisis helpline, and 76 survivors and 62 children had one or more forms of housing assistance. So that is they might be getting emergency housing and staying in one of our transitional units. They might just be getting rental assistance. People can enter those tiers at any place. We have seen a 20% increase in our client numbers since the start of the pandemic. And that has been a nationwide trend, and those numbers have stayed high as we've sort of gotten out of the pandemic. And so sometimes it's helpful to, it's a little lag there. Some people approach things in different angles, and sometimes it's helpful to see the economic costs of domestic abuse. I think that's something that people don't think about very often, and there have been a lot of studies. These are actually all numbers from 2016, but if you just sort of extrapolate that all those numbers have gotten higher, certainly not lower since then, and thinking about, obviously we know what the burdens on the social fabric of our community are when there's domestic violence and abuse happening, but there is also the loss of employment time. There's the medical costs. There's the impact on the criminal justice system. There's property loss and damage. So it's estimated that government sources are paying an estimated $1.3 trillion of the economic burden of domestic violence. And then, of course, there's not just the impact to the victim themselves, but there's the children's exposure to domestic violence. And that has long-term consequences on mental health, school performance, physical health as well, and costs associated with that, too. So if you think back to the 96 clients we served last year alone in Pickens County, and we take that 81,000 roughly number, that would mean that the overall cost for lifetime for just 1 year's worth of victims in our county would be close to $8 billion. So this is our concept. We are building the Holly Center for Hope and Healing in Basalt. We own the land. It is right next to Iberian Rugs. So if you turn at the Park and Ride in Basalt and go down that road. When we went in search of property, we learned pretty quickly that about 1.5 properties per year become available that kind of met our search profile, which was near public transport. A lot of times our survivors go into shelter with no car, near community services, and zoned commercial, because we were going to get a lot of pushback if we were in a residentially zoned area. We knew that right away, and about 1 acre. So this property was on the market. We put in an offer. They came down in price for us because of our use, and we closed on the property in November. We got approval from the town of Basalt. So we're in Pickens County, but town of Basalt. So we got approval for our use of a domestic abuse center. Of course, such a thing didn't exist in the code in Basalt, so we needed that added first. And now we're at the tail end of our site plan review process. So the building is designed. We're working with 2757, an architectural firm based out of Carbondale that did the Basalt Vista housing, the teacher housing behind Basalt High School. So they know how to work with the town of Basalt. They know how to do affordable. And we're very focused on having a energy efficient building. So it's going to be zero energy ready. It's going to have photovoltaics and be designed both with heightened security in mind, but also with energy efficiency in mind. So we got approval from Planning and Zoning, Town Council. We have second reading from Basalt Town Council next Tuesday. So that side of things are going along quite well. You will notice that it has our office and the shelter. So we are no longer, as a domestic violence agency field, doing confidential shelter. It just does not work with the way that survivors are interacting in their communities anymore. Back in the 80s, when the battered women's movement first came about, these safe houses existed and women and children would go into there and stay hidden away. They wouldn't be going to work, the kids wouldn't be going to school until they could move away or the perpetrator was arrested. Now it's very fluid. Like, all of our survivors work in the community. Their kids are going to school. If we tried to have a confidential location, it would be discovered right away. Tracking devices on cars, people following, kids and phones. It's just not feasible. Instead, every agency that we have researched that is building a new shelter in the last couple of years is doing what's called a public-facing shelter. And the idea is that we're saying to the community, here's where the shelter is, which, one, destigmatizes people who are dealing with domestic abuse. We're not saying you have to be hidden away. We're saying this is something we're all dealing with. Two, perpetrators are a lot less likely statistically to try to approach their victim in a public place where a place where they don't know what security may exist. They're a lot more likely to approach somebody at their place of work or the kid's school, someplace that they're familiar with, a park, following them. Here, they don't know what security is in place. And finally, we're building a building that is very secure. So there's cameras all around the building. There's only 2 entrances to the building, and they are all have double security features on them with video cameras at the doors, keypads, and individual codes for everyone coming in and out. So it makes it a lot easier for our survivors in shelter to get services. It also makes it easier for our staff to supervise and to connect with survivors who are in shelter. But it's also a wonderful place for us to office. Right now, we're very fortunate to be at Health and Human Services, but we have very much outgrown our space there. There are 5 of us in a space that's not much bigger than this whole table. And it is quite hard for us to meet clients there. So we will have the office space is just shy of 2,000 square feet. It's all on the first floor, and then the second floor is all the shelter spaces. So here's our floor plan. This will still be transitional housing. It will replace the apartments that we have right now. People will be able to stay for up to 3 months, so serving that same purpose, but we will have 7 rooms, so 5 family rooms and 2 single survivor suites. They're all efficiency units. So if you're familiar with like a Residence Inn hotel, it has your own bathroom, kitchenette, that's what these rooms will look like. And 2 of the smaller rooms can be combined with the bigger rooms if you have a bigger family, or if we're at capacity, we could actually fit 2 single survivors in 1 room. So we have 24 beds in the shelter. At capacity, we could serve 9 adult survivors and 15 children, like I said, for up to 3 months. Downstairs, we have a conference room, client meeting rooms. We have a food and clothing pantry for survivors both in shelter, not in shelter. We have 2 accessible suites in there, and we have a communal kitchen and living room, so people can kind of be in their own space if they want to be, need to be. But there's also a lot of benefit shown to be healing in community. So having a communal space where you can cook your meals. There's 2 very separate food prep areas and eating space, and then we have a fenced, secure play yard for kids on the first floor. It will also be dog friendly. Another reason that survivors often give for not leaving is they're afraid of having to leave their pet behind and what would happen to the pet in retribution. So having a pet friendly shelter is important to us as well. And finally, we are able to put an employee dwelling unit. So if you go back to this picture, see where the roof goes up again. That second floor is a small 2-bedroom employee dwelling unit. We struggle, as do most organizations here, with getting particularly our lowest paid position filled because people can't afford to live here. So being able to provide that as an asset for people either working in the office at Response or working on our crisis line, I think will really help us, as well as having a presence on site of someone living there. If in fact we don't have someone who works for Response that wants to live there, then we would add that to kind of our longer term shelter offerings. We could have a survivor and family members stay there. So our overall budget for the project is $7.7 million, including the land, which we already own. This is sort of our projected income sources for the project. I will note, so we have received a $2.25 million lead gift from the Holly Foundation. They do ask that we not share that number particularly publicly, but it's an important part of our project, obviously. We have a $4 million request to the Division of Housing for their new transformational affordable housing response grants. You guys maybe have heard of that program. It was announced last November. They were going to have one application round open at the first of every month. They had so many applications the 1st of January that they shut it down. I did spend my whole Christmas break writing that application, so we did submit it. They're incredibly understaffed, so originally we thought we would hear back from them in March. Then we thought definitely in May. I just got an email this morning saying we were not going to hear anything till late July. So, and, as I said, we requested $4 million. It would be amazing if we got that. We provide more match than required by that grant program, so we should be able to get that much, but it is very oversubscribed. So we've put $3 million in there in the expected category, but honestly, as you guys know how these things go, who knows where it's going to come down. I know that our grant manager with Division of Housing is very supportive of our project. But I think the key line here is the municipal funding line, and we're hoping to have $500,000 from our various municipalities that we serve with this shelter.
Question.
Yeah.
Have you already asked? Okay, maybe that's where you're going. So you've already made the asks and you've received 180 of the ask, or you're anticipating the ask?
So we've received $150,000 from the city of Aspen. We've received $30,000 from town of Snowmass Village. We are requesting the town of Basalt to actually waive all of our permit fees, which would be probably closer to $75,000, but we haven't, we need to have our site plan approved before we have permit fees to ask to be waived. And we're requesting 20 from Eagle. So gets to the total of 500. Was that your question?
That Perfect. Answers it. Thank you.
Why so little from Eagle?
Because we have a very small percentage of the of our service area that is Eagle, and they have given us feedback that they put a lot of money into the shelter in gypsum, and that they would not be open to much bigger asks than that.
We should work on Eagle County.
Yeah, we would support that.
Yeah.
And
Almost in Eagle.
that is all I have. So
Great.
open to any questions.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. You do know you're in a floodplain.
Oh, yes. That's why it's not the cheapest building to build.
That's why your residential's upstairs and your commercial use is downstairs. We're actually, so you pull in, because that intersection is horrible. Coming out from, I work at Mountain Greenery right around the corner. Mm-hmm. And so I see that intersection morning, noon, and night. So I know it's hard to get out from there. It's a great location for the bus because it's walkable. But it's just coming out or going into that intersection, people need to be really careful because it's just configured. It's not a great configuration. But I think the location will work. There is, I believe, a facility such as this in Glenwood Springs on South Grand.
Yep. Advocate Safe House Project has a confidential shelter. Again, it's
somewhere along that road somewhere.
Confidential, but isn't.
And it's actually fit in quite nicely in the neighborhood. They had a lot of neighborhood opposition. And it actually, my daughter lives down there, so it actually has not been an issue in their
And they've
neighborhood.
had that there for a long time.
Yeah, it's been there for a while. But yeah, I think this, and John and I talked about it briefly, and he was twisting my arm, not very hard. So yeah, I think this is something that fits into our homeless issues, but it fits so many things. The child welfare, the safety issues, and just the quality of life for people who are in these very difficult situations. So thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly?
John, what is our fund balance for the housing? Our fund, our sort of flexible housing fund.
So you all have several choices on how to fund this, actually. The ARPA funds would be appropriate, which the board had dedicated or at least indicated a desire to use some of those for affordable housing. It's clearly a COVID impact associated with the increased numbers for response. I'm going to butcher the acronym, but the LACHIF funds, the tribal funds that are more flexible are another potential source. And then the board had appropriated $5 million, of which we've used almost nothing at this point. And so there are numerous funding sources that you could use. You have not appropriated per se the ARPA or tribal funds yet, so that would require us to come back.
But we just did the tribal funds to something,
Not all of them, yeah.
but some
yeah.
of them.
Some of them, that's true. And or we could bring ARPA funds back. So there, for the $250,000 request that's in front of you right now, any of those three sources would be appropriate and would not affect your fund balance at this point.
Okay, thank you. Are we? I don't think we're under in any hurry to spend the ARPA or the tribal funds, or are we?
No, I think,
We have to have them
we have a
dedicated
deadline.
by 24.
Yep, we have
Spent by
a
26.
deadline for those. We certainly have been leaning into the child care expenditures on the ARPA funds. Who knows? I think we've gotten past the debt ceiling conversations and clawback discussions. That was our other concern. So it's really at the discretion of the board, but you're not necessarily having a big budgetary impact with this.
And the dedication of those federal funds wouldn't put any additional burden on response. It would be our burden for reporting.
I'm hoping Ann heard that question. There would be some. Yeah. Ann, would you mind coming up to the mic? We're talking about if we used ARPA funds for the response request, if it would put any additional reporting requirements on response per se.
So additional reporting requirements around
For the grant, for the use of the ARPA
the funds.
funds.
We have to file a report on the use of the funds every quarter, I believe.
But that's something we would do.
We do that. Response wouldn't have any.
Oh, would
role
they
for
have any?
reporting.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. Sorry about the
Yeah.
surprise
Well,
question.
they could help us with information to file the report, but yeah, that's a good
Would
question.
there be any conflict? Because the Department of Housing is also ARPA funds. Would there be conflict with those? I didn't think so,
No.
but, okay,
Yeah, that's our allocation.
okay.
Yeah, because they sent money to the state and then money
Yep.
to the locals.
Yeah.
It's unusual in that regard.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I mean,
We're gonna
I'm
grab all those
so
ARPA funds.
supportive
Everywhere.
of this project. I want to see this through. I would even welcome and encourage an additional contribution based on how your fundraising goes, if the board would support that. And I would suggest that we move federal money since that remains a little more at risk than our own budget reserve.
And letters of support. Do you need us to help you with that? With going back to Eagle County.
Yes, I think that would be great.
And you still have a campaign, capital campaign going
Yeah.
to the community, because I'd love to see who, if people are willing to, donate publicly, how much is being raised, and specifically how many people in the community are participating. And I think if we can be an incentive to people to get involved in some way, certainly, that'd be great.
Yeah, so maybe
And I
we can
support this.
draft a letter. Can we have staff draft a letter of support so they can use it for entities that it like Greg's question was, who else is pitching in, and other entities like to see that. So,
And we are at 3.38 million raised so far. So that's, the lead gift that I mentioned, and about 600,000 in private grants. And really our summer season of capital campaign is just kicking in, with everybody finally in
so-
town. We have a bunch of events coming up, so.
maybe a letter of support from us, just so you have it in your file, would be great.
Now, does this make it 3.6?
Yeah. Greg, can I jump in?
Yeah, Francie.
Hi, Shannon. It's so nice to see you.
Hi, Francie.
I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but I'll see you somewhere else. And that was a really great presentation. There's absolutely no way to say no to that presentation. And I agree with Kelly that I'd like for you to think of us if you get close to your goal and you need another boost. We'd probably be willing to help you get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
if
thank
I
you for
would
that,
just
too.
offer too, if we can write a letter to BOCC, if you feel like you need help getting over town council's approval, and I'm happy to reach out to Division of Housing, because I've worked a lot on that transformational funding.
That would be great.
Yeah, let us
So
know.
we have learned that our project is now with Office of Homeless Initiatives. So any reaching out, and they've been a lot less responsive. I think they only have 2 staff working on all of their applications. So that's kind of what I understand the holdup to have been, is that sort of shift of the asks in the TAG program that were related to shelters all got shifted over to OHI. So if you have any connections there, that'd be amazing.
I will find the best one.
So how far along are you with the design? Is this a conceptual, or is this pretty close to?
Yeah, we're pretty close to construction design. We're interviewing contractors. Second reading with Basalt is really a pro forma, as we found when we went in for our use approval. So, and like I said, that's next Tuesday. I think last time it took 2 minutes, so.
Okay, good.
I'm hoping you mentioned energy efficiency, all that. That's super important going forward. So are you working with CORE or CLEAR or?
We have a
consulting?
design grant from CORE. We actually have a grant from Holy Cross, because we will be Holy
Great.
Cross customers, to help with our transmission. It's not my.
So it's an electric building, which is
Yeah,
great.
it's zero energy ready, all electric. Yeah,
And then
PV on the roof.
what, those look like a ground floor, floor to ceiling windows, which are kind of intriguing. Which way do they face? And
That
you know,
is west. This is north. And we have to do different things like impact resistant glass, because it's a secure building. Small windows on the Highway 82 side, just for security as well. And as Patty noted, it is in the 100-year floodplain. I keep walking over there and it's not muddy, which is amazing, but 75% of the building is being built up on piers, and the rest is mounted up 3 feet so that we don't have any flood impacts on our downstream neighbors. And then there's a gate that goes into secure parking in the back for client cars, and that has to be a flood-resistant gate. So if there's flood, the gate opens automatically. So.
And if you need help with landscaping, let me know. Maybe I can get some contributions
Awesome.
from Mountain Greenery right
Thank
around the
you.
corner.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we're going to xeriscape for sure. We're going to
noticed
keep
that,
as
yeah.
many of our cottonwoods as we can. But yeah.
no, it looks great. Yeah, well, it's about time. I'm glad to see this come. I do remember probably the first decision I ever was asked to make when I came on this board 7 years ago was regarding funding West Springs Hospital. And they came to us with an ask, I think, of $100,000, and somehow the board decided to give them half of that. And, and honestly, I never understood it. Like, why half? They need it all, right? And so I'm grateful that this board sees the value of giving you what you're asking for.
Greg's really good at raising money
I'm
too,
hopeful
by
that
the
you
way.
that you raise everything you need, and that we can help inspire the rest of the community to pony up, whether it's other municipalities or counties or individuals. But yeah, take advantage of what we can do in the way of encouragement as well. So thank you. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for bringing it to us. It's nice to be able to spend money on something like this.
Something we believe in. Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, we've spent a lot of money today.
Thank you, Jen.
No, we're just getting
Thanks,
started.
Francie.
300 and
everybody.
something million, and
I'm like, we have?
thank you.
Thank you.
Hang in there.
I'm trying.
Is it a girl?
It's a boy.
It's a boy?
I'm very outnumbered. Yeah,
Huh.
just keeps getting worse.
Oh,
I do
can we-
have one girl dog, so
What's your due date?
hanging on to that. August 22nd.
Oh, you got a ways to go. Okay.
Oh, yes.
I think she
I live in a family. I live in a family of all females. The cat, the dog,
That's what I came
the
from.
daughters, the wife.
All
It's
the
like
daughter, yeah, all the sisters, and now I'm like, it's a.
outnumbered. Poetic justice.
I think it's going to be a girl.
They're just wrong. All the stuff.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Good to
Bye.
see you.
Okay, moving right along. We're now 15 minutes behind. I lost another 3 minutes there. Francie, get me back on schedule. Ballot question polling analysis. Is that what we have?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And we have Bill Ray back with us to speak to some of the results today. We'll foreshadow that there's some nuance, I think, in these results, and there may be a good conversation about us using some online polling to do some follow-up based on the presentation that Bill's about to give you. So I think what we'd like to do is go ahead and have Bill share the results from the poll, and then bring it back to the board for a discussion as to whether you would like to see follow-up. I think staff has some recommendations around those, around that we'd like to share with you, but it'll really be up to the board. And so, Bill, with that, I know we're running behind schedule. I don't want to go too long and just get you right into it.
Sounds good. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, board, for having me back. I'm going to share my screen and do a presentation. I'll try and keep it moving along since you're behind a bit. Okay.
I don't want you to
froze up there.
rush. I don't want you to
Apologies.
rush too much. We'll dip into our break if necessary. This is important to get
Okay.
thoroughly.
Great. Well, understood. And I think I froze up there a little bit, so hopefully I'm not going to have a big bandwidth challenge. So I want to jump right in. So as you know, we did a survey. Actually, I'm going to go real quick into the methodology and then back up into those takeaways. So we did a statistical survey of Pitkin County likely voters. The survey was in the field from May 31st to June 1st. We had 300 respondents take the survey, and we have a margin of error on the survey of 5.51%. That means statistically, any of the data points you see could shift one way or the other, 5.5 percentage points. The survey was conducted using a mixed mode methodology. We did live calls to landlines and mobiles, and we also did text and email invites so folks could take the survey online on their mobile devices. And the survey results were modeled to a November 2023 likely election turnout. At the back end of this survey presentation, there will be 2 slides that'll show the demographics of who took the survey. And then another slide that shows some voter statistics that show what voter turnout has been in Pitkin County and what it might look like this November 2023. So those are kind of important data points to go back and look at later. And if at any point the slides don't change, just let me know. Key takeaways
You move the
from the
thumbnails.
survey. And these are takeaways that I gleaned from reviewing the survey, and I put together 5 takeaways. Housing's a clear priority for the residents of Pitkin County. They identified availability, affordability of housing as both the top issue, 38% of respondents facing the county, and the top priority for the county commissioners that they believe the commissioners should be working on in the next 2 years. That alignment on the top priority is great for the board. It's great for the community to be aligned on the top priorities. You don't always see that, but the respondents aren't sure that the proposed policies, the ballot questions that we proposed to them in the survey, are at this point the right approach for dealing with this top priority of housing and childcare. So childcare did not rank as high of a concern or priority for respondents. It was still received well, but not like the housing issue. I think the ballot proposal may receive increased support if it was solely focused on housing. Also, another piece that was well received or received strong response as part of the survey was the cost message that we're estimated that the mill levy increased ballot question would have been about $12 per month on $1 million of home value. So any changes to the ballot proposal, if you think about moving forward, if you focus it solely on housing, I think folks do need, the community will want to hear that kind of dollar and cents value messaging so that they can make an informed decision about the ballot proposals. Concerns over property tax, absolutely. I'm sure you're not surprised by this, that responses throughout the survey showed a high level of concern about property taxes, the timing of these proposals with the assessment process. There was general opposition to taxes in general, concern over the level of property taxes and taxation. Those were the top reasons when folks were opposed to the ballot measure or unsure on the ballot measures. That's the reasons they gave. And then also it was the primary issue addressed in the open-ended comments. So folks wanted to speak their mind about their concerns with the property tax. The next bullet down, as you'll see in a couple slides, we asked, do you believe the county's going in the right direction or the wrong track? The right direction was just below 50%, which is a pretty good score. It's about what I'm seeing in other communities on the right direction, wrong track. But most of the respondents went for kind of the softer, mostly right direction. They weren't certain about it. And I just want to raise that, concerns over taxes, concerns over the cost of living could tip community members toward the wrong direction. So just when we look at those numbers later in the presentation, we just need to think that we're right on the edge, kind of between right direction, wrong track. I think there was a lot of support for action on housing. The open-ended responses, while there were a lot of people who talked about taxes in those open-ended responses, there were still a fair amount of respondents who, across all demographic indicators, it wasn't just one group like younger residents, but there's a high level of comments about let's address housing and let's take action. Let's get moving. Let's put something in place. And then with the messaging that we tested, the top messaging was around having housing for future generations to support essential workers like nurses and teachers. So those were really well responded to in the survey. So to me, that shows that folks do want to see some action on housing. And then I think finally, I think this survey tells me that, you know, maybe the proposal, the ballot language that we crafted for the survey is not exactly where the community wants it. The policy direction is not yet fully evolved, but there's definitely outreach, discussions, messaging, engagement to be done with the community to explain how the county can be involved in housing and how we can take action and get moving like we saw in other parts of the comments. All right, so hopefully the slides advanced. So one of the first questions we asked was satisfaction with the direction of Pitkin County. Generally, do you think things are going in the right direction or on the wrong track? And you can see here, even though 45% feel that the county is going in the right direction, the light blue bar indicates folks who say mostly the right direction, kind of a little softer response. And the dark blue bar at the bottom of that would have been folks who are like definitely in the right direction. That blue bar is pretty small. You want to see a little more kind of intensity on a question like this. Whereas on the orange side, the wrong track, you can see about 42% feel the county's going in the wrong direction, and there is some intensity there, 14.5%. Below all these charts are what's called a heat map. Some people call these the crosstabs. And it breaks out different demographics and just kind of shows you how folks answer it from those different demographics. So for example, on the top line, the way to read this is along right direction. The darker the color, the more intense the answer. So when I think about kind of key groups to look at on the right direction, you can see here that Democrats, 48% of the Democrats responding to this felt that we are in the right direction. Independents, 49%. Those are your two biggest kind of groups of voters in an upcoming election. Folks in the city of Aspen, 48%. So that's how we use the heat map. I think interestingly, on the far right-hand side where it says 4 of 4, that means folks who vote in every election. They vote in odd numbered year elections, they vote in even numbered years, they vote in primaries. Those are your dedicated, I get a ballot, I turn in a ballot. 55% of folks who vote in every election felt at least the county's going in the right direction. So that's a positive indicator there because that's your November 2023 likely voter right there. Top priorities in Pitkin County. So we gave folks a bucket of priorities to what are the top priorities facing the county right now. And you can see at 38%, it's availability and or affordability of housing. Next, taxes, including the potential increase in local property taxes, then cost of living. So, you know, kind of a lot of pocketbook issues there in the dark blue on the left-hand side. And then going down into those lighter blue ones, single digits for roads, transportation, the environment, jobs, economy. In the heat map there, once again, affordability of housing, it's a top issue for everyone. You can see it's darker blue for Democrats, independents, but the tax issue, much more intense for the Republicans at 45%. So, you know, that kind of follows conventional wisdom. here with kind of how these issues break out along partisan lines. Then we broke out a question that said, okay, what do you think the top priority is, though, for the county commissioners to address? And here's where it jumped up. I mean, overwhelming. 50% said affordable workforce housing. That's what they'd like the commissioners to be working on over the next year or two. Roads and bridges, 12%. The airport, almost 11%. But you can see here in the heat map below, your Democrats are 59% on that issue. Your gender, age groups, breakouts on the left-hand side, it's universal. Folks in Pitkin County want to see action, want to see movement on this housing issue. All right, so then we transition to asking folks the ballot question. And what we like to do is we ask the ballot question at the front end of the survey, and then we ask it at the end of the survey to see if people change their minds or there's any differences or movement across the survey. Just so you know, the ballot language we tested is in this presentation. It's just at the back end because it's pretty long. But you can see here that the mill levy tax increase ballot language came out 47% yes to 42% no. You know, at least it was on the plus side. On the yes, some things I would raise for you. The dark blue at 19.4% are those definitely yes, versus that dark red, dark orange at 31% are the definitely no's. For me, as someone who's done this for many years and analyzes these numbers, I more sometimes focus on those dark areas, the definitely yes versus the definitely no. Sometimes a little more than the overall number, because what those tell me are those are the intensities. Those are the folks who, the minute their ballot comes, they've made up their mind. They already know how they're going to vote. And you like to see, definitely you'd like to see kind of equilibrium between those two numbers, or the yes side to have a larger proportion or a larger percentage compared to the definitely no side. So that's a concerning piece of these numbers for me, and something that I want to highlight to you. You can see here in the heat map, you have Democrats, 60% supported the ballot language, and that's important. They're your second largest block of voters in your county. However, independent / unaffiliated voters, which is your largest block of voters, they were a little less supportive at 40%, and actually they were 49% no. So at this point, kind of the largest kind of single group of voters is not supportive of the property tax increase question. So definitely something to kind of keep an eye on and think about moving forward. We didn't ask a sales tax ballot question per se, but we offered it as a trade-off, and the language is here on the right-hand side, or left-hand side. But basically, we offered a 0.76% sales tax to raise the $12 million. We explained how much that would be on a $100 purchase. We also explained that visitors to the area can help fund that, but that it would also have an impact on our local communities, like Aspen, Snowmass Village, and portions of Basalt. But when we asked, would you be more or less likely to support that, there was folks recognizing that sales tax was a reasonable alternative proposal. Now, we know that there's a lot of policy work that would have to go into looking at a sales tax as an actual ballot question option. But you can see here, 51% said they would be more likely to support this. over the property tax. And then here you see that dark blue, 28%, outpaces that dark orange, 21%. So those are really good, good numbers there. And actual strong support across political party voters, age groups, for the sales tax. Bonding. We asked a simple bonding question that would allow the county to leverage the funds from the mill levy into a bond to address infrastructure and other kind of capital expenses that went with housing and providing housing. And here you can see that fared much better, 56.5% to 33%. We had a little more equilibrium on the dark blue bar at 17.5 versus the dark orange at almost 22%. Pretty good support across all the demographic breakouts for the bonding. But as we know, on a policy issue, at least the way it was constructed for the survey, that we have to have the mill levy piece to have the bonding piece, since they were since that would be the pay for. If you were to consider going forward on bonding alone, obviously the policy would have to be adjusted to have a payment mechanism for the bonding, and then that would have to be likely built into the ballot question. Property tax impact. We offered a question that explained that this would raise property taxes about $140 per year, or just about $12 per month on $1 million in actual home value. Knowing this, would you be more or less likely to support this? And I think this is a great response. 46% said they would be more likely. Who would be more likely? Interestingly, Republicans at 51% said they would be more likely to support this, knowing that that was the property tax impact. Unaffiliated, the independent ones, still 39%. So there's, to me, that says we have education to do if we're going to proceed with this. We have community engagement to do to explain the tax impact and what it means to the community, so folks can make that value judgment with their taxes. If you selected no or unsure on any of the ballot questions, we broke you out into a subgroup, and we tried to drill down, why were you a no or unsure about either of these ballot questions? And you can see here the number one reason at 28% was generally just don't support tax increases or debt. The next group, 19%, property taxes are already too high. And then almost 18% concerned about that upcoming property, about the reassessment of property values. 10%, usually we see need more information as higher. Folks just want to get more educated. And then 8.8% other uses. A good number, only 1.9% said housing's not a pressing issue. So at least folks are still recognizing that housing is an issue, even when we broke them out into this question. Okay, rating the proposal's priorities. We broke out kind of some of the programmatic pieces of the proposal, the ballot proposal. So the first one, the top bar, increasing the supply and access to housing through land and housing acquisitions, partnerships, public-private partnerships, and redevelopments. It's the dark blue bar that I look at to see, is this really a top priority? And anything over 50% in that dark blue bar means I think the community really sees that as a priority that they would make a value judgment on with their taxes. So 52% likes that kind of public-private partnerships, acquisitions, redevelopment piece. The next one down at 51% was programmatic, using the money for programmatic work, down payment assistance, deed restrictions, those different kind of programmatic pieces. As part of the ballot question, we included childcare. And you can see, even though overall the dark blue and the light blue are about the same aggregate number, the intensity of the dark blue shrinks on the childcare pieces, so that they're just not as kind of strongly, seen as what folks want to see their tax dollars being spent on. But you can see improving quality and availability of childcare, 42.5%, and then the lowest one as far as intensity on the dark blue was that training and retaining our professionals in the childcare, that capacity of the professionals piece that we know is important to providing childcare. All right, I broke out a heat map of those folks in the dark blue, the very important. And just so you can see kind of key groups, on how they responded to those separate programmatic pieces here. Of course, increasing the supply and access through acquisition, public-private partnerships, very well received amongst many of the demographic groups, but really interesting kind of older men. That's one the fourth column, men 55 plus, little weaker there. And that's going to be a big group of the voters in a November 2023 election. So that's one that kind of caught my eye. Obviously, the Republican respondents were a little less supportive of the tax issue to begin with, so they were a little less supportive here of the priorities identified. And then the unaffiliated voters as well, that they below 50% on all the programmatic pieces that we suggested, these priorities. Messaging. We tested a whole bunch of different messages so that we can better communicate and engage with the community on these proposals. And once again, that dark blue bar is really what we're looking to kind of key in on to see if a message is truly impactful. And none of the messages hit that kind of magic 50% mark, but we got close, mid 40s. But you can see the top 3 messages, and we often think about messaging as a rule of 3. That, anytime we create a good messaging matrix, it's got 3 pieces in it. So that's why I brought up the top 3. We tested other messages, and that data is available to you all to review how the other messages came out. But helping future generations, maintaining the character, and providing housing for our essential workers like nurses, teachers. Those were the messages that resonated the most with the survey respondents, and kind of what moved them to be supportive of this ballot proposal, this policy proposal that we offered to them in the survey. All right, so at the end of the survey, we asked the ballot questions again to see if folks changed their mind. And here you can see on the property tax, we had a 3.1 point drop in support. So the no side stayed pretty consistent. The yes side dropped. Some of that went into the unsured, folks who were now unsure about the proposal. You still have in the heat map below, you still have pretty good support among younger voters, though they're going to be one of the smaller blocks of voters in 2023. Still pretty strong support among Democrats. Unaffiliateds aren't as strong at 35%. And you're all the way on the right-hand side, you're 4 out of 4 voters, those most likely going to vote in every election, they dipped as well. So I think even though there's still support for the ballot question, there's just going to need to be a pencil sharpening, maybe focusing it on housing only and not childcare, and then really, if you're going to keep moving forward, really communicating the cost and the value to the community. The bonding likewise had a 3.9 point drop in support, and likewise the no side stayed very constant, and your yeses mostly moved into the unsure category. Democrats still very supportive of the bonding proposal. Your independents and unaffiliateds actually approaching almost 50% at 46%. Your 4 out of 4 voters, your most likely voters on the right-hand side, they're actually over 51%. So the bonding still has, I think, some strength, but it needs a pay for as part of being a successful policy proposal. So that would definitely shape if you were kind of what you would think about bonding moving forward. All right, I'm getting close to the end, I promise. At the very end of the survey, we asked an open-ended question, just what are your reactions to this? What do you want to share with us? And I find this to be sometimes one of just the most informative and valuable pieces of this survey, And I've shared with the team a form of all these responses with some demographic information kind of attached to each one, so you have a perspective of what the comment is, but I broke some of these out. Look, there are more than 240 responses in this question. And I think folks were very thoughtful and took time to give us a thoughtful answer. I broke a few of these out. I think there was a fair number, maybe about 30%, that wanted to share their support for housing, their desire to see housing be addressed successfully. And so you can see some of the comments that I pulled out that I believe are indicative of that support. Concerns over the heart of the community being lost, that we need to keep this a thriving community for all people, not just for tourists and the wealthy. So, and there's a lot more of those kind of comments in the overall report on the open-ended. As well, there were a lot of concerns expressed in the open-ended. Most of them, I would say, were about taxes, the assessments, and the priority of dealing with housing. You can see here from those comments, someone said there's a serious need for employee housing, but this isn't the best time to ask for a tax increase because we don't know what our actual taxes will be. Some folks were very direct. Stop raising taxes or you're going to drive people away. Proposed property taxes are a powder keg. Tax the second homeowners. Lots of comments around taxing second homeowners, taxing visitors, taxing the wealthy. So you'll see that a lot in these open-ended questions. The other thing that I would say that I observed in the open-ended questions is a lot of folks did bring up APCHA by name or by acronym, and concerns about APCHA and current housing programs. So I think if you decide to move forward with this process, I think there's also some community education that's going to be necessary about how this is different than City of Aspen housing policies and proposals. What is happening at APCHA and trying to communicate maybe how this is different than what APCHA is doing and what is happening at APCHA, because there were a fair number of people who brought that up specifically. So I wanted to highlight that as well. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to put the key takeaways back up on the screen. I'm going to stop talking and happy to take any questions or be part of the conversation.
Great, thanks, Bill. Comments, questions? John, do you have anything you want to, Patty, Kelly?
Bill, can you help me understand? I think I understood the flow of your presentation. What moved from more generic to more specific in terms of how the survey questions were formulated. So, like a general, do you support housing tax or funding for housing, a priority for funding, and then moving towards this is how a property tax would implicate you, or and how do you feel about that? Is that a fair way to kind of think about the flow here?
Yes, I think that, and I hope that's how I generally expressed it. But yes, we start very general. How are things in the county? Right track, wrong track. What are the priorities? So those are more 20,000 foot issues. And then but then one reason I want to explain that I like, and I think it's really important to try to ask ballot language, something that closely approximates what folks will see on their ballot, because that's the only thing we can guarantee you if you put it on the ballot that voters are going to read if they vote in this election. Can't promise they're going to read the white book that goes out to all voters, the voter guide. Can't promise they're going to read anything else, but they're going to see the ballot language. So it's important to have that specific kind of ballot language so that folks can react to it, and we can see how they react to that Tabor language in the survey. So, but then we do that messaging testing to see if there's ways we can explain it, right, for the public, because it's pretty tough to explain ballot language to folks. It's pretty complicated stuff, actually.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Patty, questions?
No, I'm good for now. Oh, well, I'll just make a comment.
Sure.
I think it's interesting, maybe it is a question actually, about bonding. I'm kind of thinking that might be worthy of really talking about a set amount, set projects, more surety for the taxpayers and the voters. Well, taxpayers, we'd have to figure out how to repay the bond. But you can't put those questions because of state law. How do you support a bonding, and this is how you'd pay for it? Can you put both of those into one question?
That would be a question for bond counsel. I know, at least historically in my career, it's been those are two separate questions, but I have seen those combined now. And so I think that'd be a question for us to ask bond counsel. And I don't know if you have already asked bond counsel that.
No, I believe they have to be two separate questions.
That's been my experience, is they have to be two separate questions because of single subject.
Yeah, because I think that might be worthy of, because of just how close the yeses and the nos and how things changed from the beginning of the survey to the end. And I think it really would mean the board should really discuss that, as far as would that not be a good choice for us to move forward in November.
Kelly and then Francie.
Yeah, thanks. Just, again, two sort of procedural questions as I think through all this. Bill, you said that the survey was for 2 days, May 31st and June 1st. Is that correct? Okay, and what was why? I thought that we were looking at like a 2-week or longer period of time.
Yeah, great question. So if we were going to do the companion online survey, that would have been open longer, but we decided to hold off on that online survey so that maybe that's an option for getting feedback moving forward if we're going to kind of fine tune the proposal and kind of bring it back to the community. So the online survey, so that we could gather more feedback from the community, that would have been a little longer horizon for us. So we put that on hold. The other thing is the phone call part, where we actually have, folks making live phone calls. Sometimes that goes real quick when folks pick up the phone and take the survey. And in this case, we just had a really successful 2 nights of dialing. Sometimes that can go a little longer if you're trying to meet quotas. We don't have enough older respondents. We don't have enough men versus females. And, because we're trying to hit those demographic statistical targets. We just really had a good round of fielding the survey. And so it only took 2 nights.
Okay, thank you. And then when you said you had 240 open-ended verbatims, is that from the 300 participants, or are there multiple?
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
About 240 folks took time to provide an open-ended verbatim response, and we capture that, and then I provided that in a report to your team at the county for review.
Francie has a question, unless you've got
No,
one.
I'm good, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Greg. I have a question and then I have some comments. So, does a ballot measure like this usually do better in a presidential election year or another an even numbered election year with more voters or with fewer voters? Do you have an answer for that?
I do. Thank you for that question. If my slides are still sharing, I'm going to go to my very last slide. And the reason I do this slide is that voter behavior is very, voters are very habitual. And odd numbered year voters are the most habitual. They vote every time they get the ballot. But there is something very consistent among those voters in everywhere. They trend older, and the older your voters are, the conventional wisdom is they're a little more tax sensitive, fixed incomes. So that is something to keep an eye on. So in the yellow bar on the age groups, you can see that when I look and try and predict a election turnout for November 2023, I see that voters 65 to 74 are going to perform at 9.34 points higher as a percentage of the turnout. They're going to make up 25% of the vote. So we really need to look at that demographic, and we really have to understand how older voters would perceive these ballot questions. So, and then typically you see higher Republican turnout, lower unaffiliated turnout, but since your county has so many Democrats, you do get a boost in Democratic turnout in odd numbered year elections, which is kind of a little different than a lot of places in Colorado. To get back to your actual question, typically a even numbered election year has younger voters. A presidential election year has even younger voters turn out who are less tax sensitive and might support something like this, but they're also harder to educate on public policy proposals. So there's kind of a trade-off. You get a younger voter pool who might be less tax sensitive, but you have more kind of community engagement, education to do as part of that. So it is kind of, I call this sausage making, for lack of a better term. We have to kind of look at all these different factors for turnout and deciding what's the best election.
Okay. So I'm wondering, I don't want to be a naysayer, but I'm kind of discouraged by these numbers actually. And I don't know, I'm just wondering if we could get through this year where everybody's so upset about their property evaluations, and spend some more time waiting until a more friendly election period of time comes, whether that's in our best interest, because I think the worst thing we can do is put a ballot measure out there and have it be defeated. And then we're like done for a while anyway. I'm wondering what other people think about that. I mean, I don't want to make that suggestion, but I'm worried.
Thanks, Francie. Thoughts? John, my
Great.
question was going to be what's next from here, but if you have a response to Francie's.
Well, it's not a response. That's really going to be up to the board. But just to throw one more interim step or possible interim step before that decision is made, we did hold on the online polling. That is still available. I think in Bill's presentation, there were some suggestions that there could be tweaks that might influence that ratio of voters more favorably. For example, do you test the question as just a housing question? Do you maybe decrease the amount slightly from the 12 million? You could still cover a fairly significant bond authorization with lowering it. And is there any reason to test those this year? Or the alternative, as Francie has suggested, is to spend this year doing more planning and looking for a more favorable environment. There did seem to be some, in I don't know if intriguing is the right word, but the numbers on the importance of the issue and some of the energy around addressing it for housing in particular, suggests that maybe there's a slight pencil sharpening that may or may not influence those results. And so one option would be to go back out with a version of the online polling, testing these different messages before the board makes that decision. Or if you've seen enough, of course, that's your call.
Kelly?
I mean, I'll make some comments. I think this is discouraging, but I also think that we, have repeatedly heard how the rising importance of this issue has been over years in our community. And I want us to unpack assumptions, I think, before we make some decisions, because there's quite a lot of voters who will not have their assessments affected because of the current round of property tax. And we are actively having a conversation as a board of how we provide relief in a meaningful way for people in our community whose assessments will be harmful for them. And, those are all those are all things that are happening in addition to this information that we have before us. And I think it comes down to whether we want to champion this and lead it, because, a 50% plus one vote requirement to pass this is not a given based on what Bill has presented to us today. Which I think has a lot to do with context of timing. It has a lot to do with off-year elections. And if the whole campaign is perceived negatively, you will not inspire people to vote. Even if many of the people who will vote, won't be negatively affected by their tax bills in the coming years. So there's sort of more at work here, and I feel like the question is for us, are we ready to lead and champion this to get that 50% plus one as the context of an election this year is not pointing in that direction of its own, absent, I think, really, dedicated effort on our part on an issue that we know has a lot of meaning and urgency in our community, and for which we have not meaningfully responded in the last, since the onset of the pandemic, when the pressures have grown increasingly. So that's what I'm thinking through here. Like, I continue to be ready to champion on this issue, but I think it will take strong leadership from our whole board in a positive campaign.
Greg, can I? I still think I have more information about a bonding question, dollar amount, plans, how to use that money, rather than going out to polling again. I think we've seen, I was surprised that childcare didn't come up higher on the list, very surprised. And it was interesting that you usually see the housing and the childcare, the nexus between those two. That road and bridge, after this last winter and the deterioration of our roads. Too bad we're not going back to our road and bridge question that we asked many years ago that barely failed. But I myself would like to see more information come back for a bonding rather than just going for a flat property tax. Bonding that maybe property tax paid for a certain amount of time. So there's more known, people would know more, be more assured.
And Patty, just for clarity, are you talking about a bonding question only supported by existing revenue sources, or are you talking so lower property
Yeah, but at
tax,
least
or,
it wouldn't be
got
for
it.
the rest of your life you're going to pay for this. It would be to pay off this bond.
So
And what
sunset.
the amount might be, 50 million, 25 million, 300 million.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
With a plan.
If we were to pursue bonding, how specific would we have to be about the use of the funding?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, that you can, do you have to get down to a level of a specific project? Not necessarily. And if you do have that, of course, describing that fully is beneficial. I do think we could provide some realistic targets in terms of number of units that would either be purchased and or developed as a result of a bond to provide a target. I know we have been doing some of that analysis as staff, and I think that is what we'd be more prepared to do within the timeframes that we're talking about. The only specific projects that we have on the table would be Phillips, and we also are working on some of the Forest Service transfers, but those aren't even far enough along now that they'd probably be ready to go out with a description. But we could go to a level of
For money going to our
X
programs,
number of,
buy downs, et cetera.
I just wonder, though, what do you give up? Like, what is the long-term play there? So you get immediate bonding now and, say $50 million. How does that compare to waiting until next year to go after 15 years of $15 million per year?
Yeah, that's a discussion I think we should have, because I'm not sure this year going out for the long-term property tax is going to won't get us anywhere. So I was just seeing, because we have these projects that are ripe, getting riper, I should say, very ripe, some of them, now to talk about. But
Francie?
Yeah, I have talked to John about this quite a bit. I am concerned about doing anything unless we have something to show for what we're going to do. And so I kind of feel like if we waited until next year, it would give staff and us a chance to specify certain projects that we could draw up in a brochure that people can look at and say, oh God, this is what they want to do. Because I think asking for people to commit 15, 100 million, whatever it is, dollars to something that we can't show them what it is tenuous at best. And that if we could come up with some projects, I mean, Snowmass and Aspen both have incredible published materials to show what their plan for affordable housing is, and we don't have anything. And I think it makes us look irresponsible in asking for this money.
Thanks, Francie. Kelly?
Francie, I don't disagree that that's good policy. I think that's good policy. I just don't know how necessary it is in a community that passes statewide funding for housing at 70+% with no detail and with no promise of getting any of that money in different conditions. You know, so this is, this is an issue we have not dedicated a lot of policy or funding or solutions around as an organization, and it continues to be a huge priority in the community. And if we forego solutions again or pursuit of solutions again, I want them to be to justify that for very clear reasons. Again, you know, we don't know who's appealing on taxes. We don't know what the outcome of those appeals are going to be. We don't know what, you know, we don't have the clear terms of the relief that we want to offer. Like, I just think that maybe we should be more clear-eyed about saying no to such an important issue.
I think we're all trying to be clear-eyed.
Well, we won't have information really about property taxes till after November, right, John? I mean, by the time we do mill levy and everything, we won't have that surety there. But I think it's worthy of more in-depth discussion as to how we could approach it, a ballot question, be it this year or next year. But again, I'd like to see more information on how we might craft a question with the bonding payback, or with how many years out, how much.
As Francie points out, if this fails, it's not going to come back for
Road and Bridge
a
still
while.
hasn't come back.
right? And it's only going to become more necessary. And so I think if we're going to put something like this out there, we have to get it right. And I don't think it's right. One, I saw significant concern about the deafness, the tone deafness of raising, putting a tax measure on the ballot in a tax year where, as I understand it, most everybody's valuations have gone up significantly, and we're going to see significant increases in people's property taxes. I was, you know, had I designed the poll, I probably would have tried to be more specific about, you know, what would it be for specifically if we could? Do we have any guardrails? Are we going to be seeking partnerships? It did hint at that. There was no suggestion that it might actually sunset. Is this in perpetuity forever? Those are the questions that I would ask as a taxpayer. When we, you know, if we could do additional polling, I'm not convinced that it would be extremely valuable. When you do anything in a rush, you wonder if it's about its value. But I would almost like to design something that is more specific so people know what they're going to be paying for, and they know what the guardrails are that we have to work with, so they really understand where it's going to go and how's the money going to be spent. I think that's important. But the biggest issue I have right now is just that we have a public I haven't met anybody who isn't concerned about their property valuation, and the concerns they have about taxes, and that includes the entire spectrum, not just wealthy people, not just middle-class people, not just longtime residents who might have property but no money. I think it's across the board. This is it's a pretty harsh headwind to be proposing that we put this tax on. Decreasing the amount is an interesting thought. Removing childcare hurts, but you know, what would it take to get it passed? I guess I'm not ready to give that up yet, but I heard what, you know, what Bill said. So if I had to decide right now, I'd say, let's not put it on the ballot this year. If my board wants to do some more research, we can try to see for what it's worth, do an online survey and try to be much more specific about what we're gonna do. Perhaps there's some value in that. I see Bill has a comment. I thought you had a comment.
Sorry, I think I was swatting a mosquito away. I apologize, Commissioner.
Mosquito? You have mosquitoes?
Okay, so if that was just a
Brain
mosquito.
alarm.
Yeah, so I guess, Bill, that, you know, I don't want to waste your time and we don't want to waste our money, and, you know, what do we anticipate we can glean from additional information gathering, given what we've
Well-
received so far?
Yeah, I mean, my top recommendation would be I like what you're discussing around refining your plan, or kind of building a plan. You're right. The survey was a little more general in how the tax dollars were going to be used. They were more programmatic, right? Deed restrictions, public-private partnerships. Let me address real quick. I heard you bring up sunset. Well, since the property tax proposal was also going to be part of paying the bond, policy-wise, you typically don't do a hard sunset in that, because you have bond payments at least for 25 years. So there's, and then I think a 25-year sunset in a ballot question probably doesn't ring very authentic to folks taking the survey. So just to that's why the sunset wasn't in there, though. It can be a policy discussion that you all have as a board for sure, and can be added into part of the kind of revising the plan. But I guess my top recommendation, and it follows with your conversation, is the next steps would be to tighten up the plan, focus it, I think, more on housing. Even though childcare was generally agreed that it was a priority, just wasn't the strength of housing. So I would do some community engagement around a more revised plan, and then do another round of surveys after that to see if the community responds to, hey, here's what we did. We learned this. We modified our policies. Now we want to get your feedback on this new modified approach to addressing housing. That's when the next survey is pretty valuable.
So then the next question is for you and for John. Is this possible in a timely fashion before we have to decide to put it on the ballot?
Well, before you have to decide to put it on the ballot, yes. Before it is likely you'd have to have a campaign going is a whole nother question. I think that goes back to, what Kelly was asking, of the board, which is, this, I wouldn't expect that if we went back out even with a refined plan and such, that it would come back, anything would come back as a slam dunk, right? It's going to be an uphill no matter what. It's just we're talking about degrees of feasibility at this point, I would suggest. And so the real question is, where's this board's passion and energy on this? And, if there's a lot of hesitancy still right now and there needs to be more certainty, I guess my recommendation would be we take a year and work on it more. If the board is really behind, because it really need to be the board doing a lot of this public engagement that we're talking about, and doing that work. Staff can do so much, but this is really going to be a political question that the board is going to have to be passionate about and behind. And so, Greg, I hate to answer your question with a question, but I'm going to answer your question with a question, which is really, where's this board's energy right now?
We have so much going on.
I just would offer, we're also in a campaign year where if you go look at all the other ballot measures that are going to be on the ballot, they're to gut taxes. So, you know, there's additional payoffs also about having an active campaign about the importance of taxes, what they do for our community, and the problems that we're hoping to solve. Because, for example, last year, an income tax gut went through that basically undermined all the other taxes that got passed at the state level. And that same stuff is coming back again this year because the conditions for voting in an off-year election like this do favor Republicans, do favor conservative mindsets, do favor not doing this. And I get all of that. I really do. I believe our community has enough support in it. I believe that there's a ton of people out there who would endorse us in this effort. I believe there's a ton of organizations that would endorse us in this effort, you know, as we articulate the problem in a meaningful way. But I cannot commit to doing that by myself. And I would like to see the full leadership of this board if we commit to that or not, or decide that next year is the better long play.
Francie?
Yeah, I think if we decide to go for it, Kelly, I would absolutely commit to it, and I think others would as well. We're not going to leave you hung out there by yourself, for sure. But I'm thinking about, you know, Shannon's presentation today with the pictures and the specifics were very convincing to me. You know, like if she had come in and said, we want to build a home for people who are in distress and they need a place, and these are the numbers that with the money we want, without anything to look at and convince me that it looked like a really viable plan, I would have been less likely to enthusiastically be willing to have the county commit $250,000 and future possible payments as well. So I do think that the depth and quality of her presentation had a lot to do with her immediate success. And I think the same would be true for us if we could come up with a quality presentation to our community about where we want to go. I think we would have a much higher possibility of success. And I won't repeat myself again. Thank you.
Thanks, Francie. Bill?
And just to tag on to what the commissioner just said is, you know, it wasn't overwhelming in the open-ended, but part of building a plan on how you would utilize these resources, these tax dollars, if you move forward, I think would need to differentiate from the current housing programs. I mean, just enough people brought up APCHA in the city of Aspen that there's conflation. There's, you know, people might conflate things. So, you know, that would I just say that would be part of your education process with the community.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Are you looking for anything today?
Well, we are on a short timeline, so if there is immediate follow-up that the board would like to see pursuant to the results of this poll, I think staff is going to need some direction. We can bring this back even next week. I know, Patty, you don't like this, but maybe even during open discussion, just to, if you all have had some time
As
to
long as we
reflect.
plan an hour for open discussion, that would be fine.
But if there is going to be follow-up, because right now I'm not quite sure what I'm getting directed to do.
Right,
Guess to
right.
be blunt.
John,
Yeah.
figure it out and come back to us next week in an hour discussion.
I'm happy to say that I'm extremely hesitant to put this on the ballot. Unlike Kelly, I'm not hearing from people who think that we ought to do this. I'm hearing from people who are kind of horrified by it, you know, to put it mildly. So I would rather have a plan with much more specifics in the way of guardrails, projects, locations, partnerships, that we could present to the public in a year than to throw this out there now hoping it'll pass. Because if it doesn't pass, and I think the likelihood of it passing is, it's not even too close to call. I don't think it's likely. And that's my perspective on it. And so I would rather than put the staff through that work now in a hurry, I'd rather we spend the next year getting it right and coming back with something that we can all get behind and campaign for. That's my one vote out of the four here. Steve's not with us today, but that's where I am. I know it's disappointing for Kelly, but I also think I'm hearing from other people.
Well, that's what we said last year.
It's important to
That is
me
what we
too,
said
and
last
that's
year.
why, I think it's important to all of us to do something about affordable housing. And Kelly, I really appreciated your push in that direction since I came on the board. But I really am concerned that if we don't do it right, it's not gonna pass. So I would like to commit more time to it and have the ability to actually talk to people about specifics before I can approve it.
Well, I hate to delay another year, so that's what we did last year. The only positive that I can really see is that we'll have some surety as to the property tax issue. People will know what their taxes are gonna be, will know what the state, whatever the state decides. I don't know if anybody will know what the state decides to do, because I don't know if the state knows what they're trying to decide to do, but that would be a known factor. An off year is a tough year, but in some ways, but it's not gonna be maybe as tough as next year, but we'll have a lot of voters next year, that's for sure. So I haven't really decided whether going for the bond, but then again, what Bill said about if you bond, you have to go out for X amount of years to pay the bond back, but at least it's a known amount rather than, going for a property tax for 15 years, would maybe garner more money at the end of the day. But we do have projects in need of funding. These joint partnerships we're looking at now, and Phillips, and putting into buy downs and equity share programs, that kind of stuff. So I don't know, it's a tough one.
Well, you've got one undecided, one absent, one for, and two against. Okay, I'm going to move this right along. Are we done? Or do you need, we want to get Steve back in
Well,
the room?
we'll have to bring it back when Steve's here, yes.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you all. Thanks,
So
Bill.
we can have 2 and 1 undecided.
Well, I mean, clearly, my recommendation is if the board is split this way, there would have to be a unified and pretty energetic effort to make this happen this year. And so I would share some concerns about, where the board's at right now as I hear this discussion and the polling with going out this year. And so why don't we, though, bring this back for one more conversation,
I
let
need
you
a little
process
time
it
to
while
gel the
Steve's here.
information.
Yeah, and let you
Great.
process a little bit.
Okay, we'll bring it back again. So it's not done yet. Kelly, say something. You wanted to say something?
I really do like you, Greg, as a person, but you are not my favorite person right now.
It's my birthday. Can you believe she just
But
said
we're
that?
not making this personal.
That's why I didn't buy you a cake. I knew how this was going.
didn't
And
bake
bake
me-
you a cake.
Oh my God.
Could Bill
Thank you,
share
Greg. We
his
lost a
slides,
cake.
please?
Are you going to share? You'll send us your slides.
Yeah, we have a copy that we can share with you. Yeah.
Greg, I might make Kelly feel better here. I have
You're gonna bake me a
rhubarb. I
cake?
have rhubarb.
Thank God it wasn't my birthday.
Could have been your birthday. It might have gone a different direction.
I have rhubarb.
Okay, we need to
You
keep
may
moving.
want to take a 5-minute break, I'm guessing, just to.
I'd like to keep
I
us
have to be
moving,
out of here
but-
at 5 o'clock, just to let you know. I've got
Are you okay?
things to do, and
Can
then
we
I'm
just
going to the
jump right in-
wildfire
We'll
thing
jump right
tonight.
into Dallas. Dallas is here. Kara's here. We're teeing this
I
up.
can just tell Dallas, yes, thank you very much. It was good information, and
I have questions.
Come on down, Dallas. Well, people can get up and take a break at their discretion. How's that? In fact, I'll go get some water. I'll be right back.
Hi, Dallas. Sorry I haven't gotten back to you. Things have been a little
No worries.
hectic, but I've been in Carbondale a lot, so maybe
Yeah, just pop in.
not as of my own choice, but
Okay.
I'll fill you in.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
And then while Dallas is getting set up, I'll just do a brief introduction and then hand it over to Dallas. So as was in the memo, why we're back here before you today. So in the 2023, what year are we talking? In the 2023 budget process in 2022, the board allocated $430,000 of REMP to CORE. At the time, there was a lot of transitioning happening, and traditionally what has happened is that CORE has come on an annual basis back in front of the board to present their grants and rebates program, and then the board approves the use of those funds by resolution. And that has been the traditional process. With Dallas's leadership and changes there, they had changed from an annual to a quarterly process, which we were trying to work through. And at the same time, also, we learned new guidance, per se, I guess, of how REMP funds could be used. And so rather than staying within the traditional model of that grants and rebates program, as Dallas and CORE has undergone their strategic plan, is also requesting somewhat of a change of how those REMP dollars could be used. Based on those changes, staff wanted it to come back before the board of a nod to approve those funds, rather than it just staying at the administrative level. I can say we have worked to get the first quarter of invoices for the grants and rebates program that has stayed within that traditional model. But Dallas is here to kind of share what he would like to see for CORE. What he would like CORE to use the REMP dollars for the remainder of this year. Is that
That's
all
pretty
right?
well said.
It's all
Thanks,
yours
Jen.
then.
Is the mic on?
Yeah, you're good. Yep.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate y'all inviting me to come and present today. I'll try to keep this brief and on target. I wanted to start out, if I may, by just giving you all an update on where we stand with our strategic plan. The board at CORE did an amazing job, I think, of working through all this. It was very complex, navigating all these issues, and I wanted to present to you a quick summary. There's far more detail than this in the strategic plan, but just to give you a sense of where we're headed over the next 3 to 5 years. So there are 5 larger goals that we set for ourselves. Number 1 is, of course, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The goal we set was close to 70,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide reductions in the next 6 years and 6 months. And what that amounts to is a 20% increase in our ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions per year leading up to 2030. Which is a pretty significant increase, but we feel like we're up to it and we're excited by the challenge. That's our first goal. The second goal, this goal aligns with a lot of the language coming out of the federal government right now around grants and other opportunities to direct 40% of our efforts to be of service to the underserved and workforce communities. And our goal is to ramp up this effort by 2025. We're certainly already well underway with that. Our third goal is to demonstrate organizational excellence in regional climate knowledge and capacity building in the built environment. Basically, to sum that up, trying to position ourselves and enhance our view in the community, or our ability to project our image in the community as the go-to climate experts in our region, to be of greater service to our community. The fourth goal is to seek out and pursue high-impact greenhouse gas reduction efforts. So really to be innovative in this space. So not just to continue on as we have been, but to try to seek out new opportunities to really set our community apart. And I think we're working on trying to do some of that even as we speak. And then the last is to diversify and increase, as you all have directed us, our sustainable funding that meets or exceeds our board's approved operating budget. So I'd like to pause there. There's certainly quite a bit more detail, as I mentioned earlier, embedded with all of this, but happy to answer any questions you all have about the strategic plan.
I could just tee it off by asking, given what we're anticipating the needs will be for addressing, climate change, reaching the overarching goals for 2030 and 2050, what kind of dent is this going to make in, as Core, and I know Core is doing its best. I've been there with you the whole time. But my concern is this is like a scratch on the surface unless we really take it seriously, and that's what this effort is for. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I'm looking at this thinking this is great, but is it enough, and how close are we going to actually get? Reassure me.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one I've been thinking a lot about, Greg, so thank you. I think Holy Cross is going to help get us quite a bit of the way there with the buildings, but even with the buildings, it only get us a third of the way towards our goal just with the buildings, which leaves 2/3 of the buildings that still need some degree of attention to help them fuel switch. I think this kind of effort will help us do that. I think it depends on how we deploy this and the degree of impact that we'll have. And so what I want to present to you is a few ideas for how we can do that to maximize the impact. And just to kind of tee this up, I think in the past, this is not month 10 for me, so I'm still learning, always learning. But as I look back onto the history of CORE, it seems, at least over the last few years, it's been more of and Ryland, who most of you know, describes it this way as well, as more of a scattershot sort of approach of really trying to target individual residential buildings, individual commercial buildings, without trying to really consolidate our efforts to maximize our impact. And what I want to present to you today is a first stab at trying to do just that, to try to shift our focus a little bit to take on a smaller number of projects that yield a much greater impact in terms of the reduction in climate pollution over time. And I think if we can do that, coupled with public outreach efforts, events that we're doing, educating the public, being of greater service to the public to make this transition to these new technologies more seamless and easier for them to take on, I think we can help move the needle along much further than we've maybe been able to in the past.
And does that assume fewer projects mean perhaps fewer employees needed as well? I know you're pretty nimble, or you have to be at CORE,
Yeah.
for the lack of a large staff.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I don't think necessarily so. I think, right now a lot of the work that we're doing is around processing grants and rebates, and that actually requires a much smaller staff than part of the vision we have right now for going forward is to do more project management and pulling together a larger number of partners to achieve a project that otherwise wouldn't happen without our assistance. And so that may actually require us to have a few more staff than we have now. Currently, we have 8 staff. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish, but we are stretched pretty thin. I'll just be honest with everyone. So for us to take on more and move in a different direction might require us to add a staff or 2 to help us accomplish that. And the other thing I would add to this is that we're also, as part of the last goal here in trying to diversify our funding, we're also aggressively chasing down federal and state grant opportunities to try to bring those outside dollars into our community and put those dollars to work doing a lot of good here. And if we're successful in doing that, that will certainly require us to in some occasions staff up to be able to handle that additional workload.
Thank you.
Sure.
Patty?
Yeah, so you have on your,
Yeah.
very succinct.
Do you want me to switch over to that? I
Well,
can.
just, yeah, because under grants, rebates, and assessments, you have provide free/subsidized assessments, $5,000 ongoing. And then down under multifamily retrofit, you have energy assessments at $50,000.
Yeah.
Can you explain? I mean, are they one and the same, or is?
I think that's a really great question, so thanks for asking.
I want the 50,000, not the 5. So
Yeah, I hear you. Well, individual assessments are for individual residential units and maybe some small commercial buildings, whereas multifamily assessments, that's a different animal entirely, because what we have envisioned is not going into individual units, but taking on whole buildings. And there are about 75 multifamily affordable housing units or buildings, not units, buildings just in the APSHA stockpile. And that doesn't include the free market stuff or other affordable housing that may be down valley that's not in the APSHA.
So the
pool.
word that's missing in the grants, rebates, and assessments is single-family housing.
Yes,
Okay, so
Yes,
that clarifies
that
it for me.
clarifies, yeah.
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
I knew there was a difference, I just couldn't figure out what it was.
No, thank you for calling that out. So if I can, I'll just go back and, if it's okay with y'all, unless there are any other questions. When I met with y'all last winter, doesn't seem like that long ago. Time's flying. What we had proposed at the time was 3 buckets of work with the money you were so generous to offer to us. The first was focusing on commercial building assessments, benchmarking, and electrification. That kind of dovetails with the work we're already doing at the City of Aspen with their Building IQ program, and we're very proud of that work. The second area of work is to sustain and enhance our energy concierge services. So this is really our customer service efforts. We really need to modernize our current practices. I think it was really great, the system that we had in place over the last probably 5 to 10 years, but with the federal dollars coming in, the shift in the funding landscape, we really need to up our game on this to be a better service to our community. And the last area of focus that we presented to you over the winter was around multifamily electrification. So, Patty, exactly to your point.
Thank you.
What we're proposing to do now really isn't much of a shift. We still want to improve our customer service. We want to get to a place, and I'll show you in a brief graphic what that might look like. We want to get to a place where someone can call CORE, and CORE can take it from there and help walk them through everything. So it's seamless for them. They just call us, we take care of everything for them. And then, you know, at the end of the day, we walk them through the financing, everything, and then that's it. You call CORE and CORE gets it done. That's where we want to go. We're not there yet.
If I get it, just briefly input that this is what I've been asking for since day one, to think of CORE as a utility.
Yeah.
Like the guy who changes the water filter, you know, they're going to show up and get you ready for winter. They're going to send you a bill, and they're going to call you again next 6 months later to reverse whatever it was they did, or make sure things are still going well. I would love it if CORE could operate in a way like that, so that maybe you're a member or maybe you're a regular customer and you expect a call from CORE to say, hey, how's that 50-year-old house you're living in doing? You need us to come, you know, close the windows for you, seal the cracks.
Yeah.
I think that's a service that would be extremely valuable. Hopefully the community would find that useful and would be willing to pay part of the cost of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a model too that we're also thinking about, you know, how in the future, how can we get to a place as part of this effort to diversify our funding where if folks come in above a certain income threshold, where we can think about, you know, having a fee for service kind of model to help them electrify their homes as well. So thank you. The second area that we really want to focus on is our foundational services. So again, the stuff y'all are familiar with, the grants, rebates, and assessments. And then the third area is around multifamily retrofits. Going in and not just doing individual units. As you all might remember, when we reported back to you last winter, we had assessed over 100 units over the course of about 5 months and given out about $250,000 in grants and rebates to help electrify those units. So we learned a lot in that process. And one of the things we learned was that there's a need to go into some of these buildings and take on the whole building. Because some of these buildings are just dated, and there's quite a bit of federal money that's going to be coming out to help support this kind of work, and we want to chase that down and bring that money into our communities. We're already starting on that process. And I'm really excited about this because I see it not just as an opportunity to electrify these buildings, but also to give these buildings a new lease on life and leverage these federal dollars to do that. I know you all were just talking about multifamily affordable housing. It's very near and dear to my heart. I used to serve on the APSHA board, so I care very much about this. And I know quite a bit about the APSHA stockpile. And I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us to kind of kill two birds with one stone here. But in order to do that, that's a new scope of work for CORE to take on. And so we need some support to help build out our capacity to do that work and do it very well. So the budget I've proposed here isn't too far afield from what we proposed to you all in the winter. What it does do, however, is it shifts some of the dollars around to give CORE more support, to stand up this capacity, to advance our strategic plan, and position CORE to be of greater service, I think, to our community by enhancing our capacity to do all the things on this slide. And just to give you a sense of what this looks like, what we're looking at in terms of a service model is really drawn from some of the more progressive communities. Specifically, New York City has a model like this. Denver is moving to a model like this. This is called a building performance hub. And this is the kind of customer service goal we want to attain. Right now, I think we should all be very proud, and you all should be very proud of the work you put into CORE over the last 29 years to position it with the capacity that it has. I'm incredibly impressed, as everybody I meet around the state when I'm running around taking meetings is as well, with the history that CORE brings and the services it provides. The first 4 dots you'll see here, starting at the top of this wheel, are all areas where CORE already has capacity around benchmarking projects, determining goals, getting an energy audit, and my eyes are getting old, so I have to squint sometimes. Defining the scope of work. But the other 5 areas are areas where there's still room for improvement. Currently, CORE does not engage directly in bidding projects. CORE does not select hang on a second, I got to read all this stuff. CORE does not select the right vendor. CORE does not help to assist the clients, the community members in writing or evaluating the contract. While CORE can provide grants and rebates, there are so many other financing mechanisms that are out there and available today that CORE can be of greater assistance in providing. For example, the Colorado Clean Energy Fund, which was just stood up really in the last year or two, is rolling out a whole host of programs and financing opportunities that we would like to be a better partner of theirs to offer those to the community. And also verifying performance, coming back in after the fact, after the contractor leaves, to make sure that the project is done and done well. I think those are all things CORE can do and CORE should do. But in order to do that kind of work and provide that kind of service, we need additional support. So what I'm asking for today is to just shift some of the funding that you all have already allocated to equip CORE with the resources it needs to be able to begin to build out those kinds of services. And as we all know, this is my last little pitch on this piece, as REMP dollars are slowly starting to fade away, CORE is going to have to rethink its value proposition to the community. Right now, I think many in the community see CORE as a place to go and get some money to offset their costs, and that's wonderful. But as our capacity to provide that service to offset their costs diminishes over time, we need a new way to provide value to our community and be of greater service. And I think enhancing our customer service, being this one-stop shop for our community members, this is hard stuff. To shift over from a gas fireplace to a heat pump, it's not easy. There are many steps involved. And a lot of people, not a lot, but some of the people we work with just frankly give up. And we don't want them to do that. We want to hold their hand and walk them through this whole thing and make it an easy, seamless process for them. So we're really excited to try to work on this. Regarding multifamily retrofits, what I think we can accomplish with what's left of this year is what's listed on the screen now, to prioritize buildings, figure out which buildings offer us the greatest bang for the buck and are in the greatest need, to develop outreach strategies for HOAs. We've already done some of this work. I think we can do even more. And we've already built a great partnership with APSHA to help us do that. To secure funding and curate financing. We're already in talks with the Colorado Clean Energy Fund. We've been in talks with a for-profit provider called Block Power, and are looking at trying to engage in a couple projects with them to try to accelerate our progress on this work. To assess the buildings, to go in and really understand what the needs are and what the opportunities are, to help these building owners and HOAs modernize and electrify their buildings. To improve the safety, the health, and the sustainability of their buildings, to determine the scope of work that should be undertaking, working with those HOAs and building owners to determine that scope and set a scope that works for them. And then finally, to identify and coordinate with contractors. We've already started to do some of this stuff, identifying some of those contractors we can engage with. We want to do more. But all this stuff takes, to your point earlier, Greg, takes staff time and energy. So that's my pitch. So happy to answer any questions you all have.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just to step back one to the previous dial,
Sure.
looks like a rotary dial. Verify performance is something that's ongoing, right? I'm just thinking, I think of that as an annual thing, rather than you do it once and walk away, and 5 years later the house leaks. You know, it's something that probably happens ongoing. I don't want to we're kind of pressed for time, so I want to keep us moving. If anybody has a question or a comment, Kara, Ashley.
I think the verified performance has always been an issue. People set up solar panels, and 5 years later, they haven't had them inspected or checked, and they're not functioning. I just followed up on the solar panels at the Maroon Creek Bridge, because I haven't followed up on those since those went in, to make sure that somebody was keeping an eye on them, which somebody is. They're working. So, and I think people just put them on the roof and forget. So I think that's really key. Or not just solar panels, but anything. You know, I mean, you seal your window, your doors once. That doesn't mean you don't have to put resealant back, you know, of some sort. So
Every
I
couple of
think
years
that's really
at least,
a key
yeah.
issue.
Yep.
Of course, financing, securing financing is right up there too.
Yeah, for sure.
Kelly, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because the work plan covers, you know, our contributions to it, but I'm wondering what is CORE's overall budget now?
Yeah, our budget for 2023 is around 2.3 million. And that's honestly, that's just with the funding that we're getting from, this is maybe going to open up another can of worms we don't have time to talk about, but that's funding that we're getting from our member communities and that we're currently getting from donors. There's another bucket of money, 1.2 million, we're projected hopefully any second now to get from the Department of Energy to support the Coal Basin project. Happy to answer any questions about that as well.
Thank you.
That's another meeting, but
Yeah.
it seems like
I
it's
drove
going
up to
it's
Coal
going pretty
Basin
well
the other
right
day
now.
to check it out.
Good. Oh, good. Yeah, it's going. I think that's going according to schedule, at least right now for the
Yeah,
summer.
and just real quickly, because I'm excited to report this news to y'all. I know you're probably behind schedule. I just went up there last week with Chris Caskey and the team, and we just discovered our largest, most significant gas leak to date. It's 23% gas. Previously, the highest concentration we found was 3%. So that was a really big
I thought it was
find for us.
28.
Oh yeah, 20. Well, you're right. So it's between 26 and 28, but that was on a low pressure day. So we're trying to figure out with the atmospheric pressure if it's going to drop on a high pressure day.
Good news when we
Could you
get bad
repeat
news.
the percentages again?
Yeah, the percentages that we found, and this was on Wednesday of last week with the CSU climate scientists up there as well, verifying all this. We found between 25 and 28% gas coming out of the LS Wood mine area.
And what did we think it was? Did you say
Well,
you had?
previously, the highest concentration gas we found last year was 3%.
That's pretty significant. That means we got to jump on this.
Well, yeah,
So
I
is that
think
methane?
It is, yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
So it's bad news in that it's confirming what we thought.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Good news in that it's confirming what we thought.
Yep.
That it's bad news. Okay. Anything else we need to do here today?
So I just want to confirm the board is in support of this work plan. Can we get a nod to move forward? Okay.
Thumbs up for
Oh,
me.
Okay.
A question?
Yeah, don't we have to approve that?
Well,
in
there's
the
just
other
been
stuff?
some changes in how the rent program could operate that we needed to bring back to all of you. And so just so you know, there will be, because of some changes that we need to make to the building code related to how rent fund revenues can be used, we'll be bringing a couple things back in front of you all over the next couple of months, but we will continue to move forward with CORE and implementing these changes.
Great.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thanks for working all this out.
Yeah,
That's
no,
the
it's been
birthday
great to
present.
work with Ashley and with Kara. They've been wonderful in helping to guide all this. So
In
thank you.
lieu of a cake, I'll
Yeah.
take this. Thank you.
I'm gonna go get my
No,
payment.
9% support for climate change and environment doesn't seem right. Right?
All right, now,
Right.
Seems
well,
off.
Okay, we're gonna keep moving here, folks. Ashcroft Wilderness.
Yeah,
How's it going?
thank you. Yeah, Will Roush, Executive Director of Wilderness Workshop, and Michael Gorman, here his colleague, are both joining us today, and they are requesting support from the board for the addition of about 1,000 acres of land up at the top of Castle Creek Road in the vicinity of Ashcroft into the Maroon Bells Snowmass Wilderness area, right? And this addition would be, it's known as the Ashcroft Wilderness Edition, and it would be included as part of the, and forgive me looking at my notes, the Gunnison Outdoor Resources Protection Act, also known as GORP, that's anticipated to be introduced by Senator Bennett in the legislature, I believe, this year again, right? And with that, I'll turn it over to Will and Michael to give you more detail and or respond to questions that you may have.
If before you start, thanks for being, is Will online?
I think he is.
Okay, if
He
he's
was.
there. I don't know if you have a map you
Yeah,
can throw up for us.
Will, could you
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
go, oh, you've made copies of it?
Yeah, there are maps in our packet.
There
Right,
is
we've
a
got
map
them in the
your
packet. I just wanted to show one on the monitor.
Is it possible, Will, to
I'll take one.
put the map
Screen
on the
grab.
screen? The map of the proposed wilderness area?
big question for you. Thank you.
Perhaps you can't hear me.
We used to have an Elmo. Don't have the Elmo
We
anymore.
used to,
Elmo's
yeah.
under the stairs outside.
Very slightly updated.
On the poor Elmo's got banished under the stairwell.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Ellen, can you hear me now?
Yes, can you hear us?
I can, and apologies, I'm not in front of my computer.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I can screen share.
Can-
This Zoom.
Can I ask a quick
I
question?
apologize.
I-
The board meeting.
Hey, Will, I apologize, we're kind of pressed for time. If I could
Yeah.
tee this up quickly, this appears to me to be something that was kind of carved out of the original wilderness when it was proposed back in the day. And maybe it's real, they realized it didn't need such a big carve out or something, because it looks like it obviously would have been part of the original wilderness application. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I'm just thinking it seems like just an obvious thing to do, and I'm already in support of it. I'm just wondering what we really need to talk about.
I have a question.
And I do. My board has questions though, so.
Yeah. Okay. And I apologize, it cut out. I think you were saying, why wasn't this included in the original Wilderness Act?
Well, something like that, or
Right.
it seems obvious that it would have been.
Yeah, and this might be a longer conversation over beers. We're not exactly sure why it was carved out. The Jim Kravitz at ACES, I think, has some historical documents, but it was.
Uh-oh, we lost him.
You turn off your video if you can. We know what you look like. This isn't working. He's up at Ashcroft, right?
So,
I can fill in if you.
Okay, Michael's going to fill it in. Will, you've gone off on us here.
So we don't know why they carved it out, but it was obviously carved out. at
Yeah, I
some point.
think, and Will can chime in once he turns his video off. But yeah, I think, we feel the same way. It makes a lot of sense.
I see. We're going to get little dribbles of it now. Okay, he's gone. I think he's gone.
Yeah, we feel the same way. I mean, it just naturally makes sense to pull that boundary down. It's, really in line with the characteristics that are up there. There aren't any existing uses or trails that would be conflicting with wilderness.
and
He's still trying.
I don't pick it up on the screen.
I think it had to do with maybe some of that area and around Hayden. So none. I'll stop. Go for it, Michael.
Michael's got it. Yeah, you're breaking up too much. I was also thinking maybe Ted Ryan or Stuart Mace had asked for that to be carved out just so they'd have more flexibility to do what they were doing at Toe Clod and Pine Creek.
So-
And maybe that's not necessary any longer.
bringing up Ted Ryan brings me to my question. The Ryan parcel sits above that, correct? It's up past Pine Creek, I believe, if I'm driving up the road with my eyes closed. But I don't know if the Ryan parcel is actually in. It's got the 10th Mountain, remnants of the 10th Mountain Division on it. The old cafeteria and some of the old platforms for the tents.
I don't,
Turn off to American?
Again,
Is it?
it's the on the north end of that map, I believe that the wilderness boundary, if it were to be added, starts at about the American Lake trailhead.
Right.
I don't think the Ryan parcel is included.
But
in
if
this
this,
piece.
on the map, is that the American Lake?
American
It's
Lake is at
carved
the
out for a
top.
road?
It's at the top of the map there.
On
It's
the north
this
end.
way?
The north end,
Yeah.
yes. That's the
Right at Elk
American
Mountain
Lake.
Lodge.
No, it would be below Toklat, but
Okay.
the
so-
top of the map is Toklat. Pine Creek is down here.
Pine Creek's right in the middle.
Yeah, but the Ryan parcel, I believe, is past Pine Creek.
I honestly,
Yeah,
I'm
it
obviously, I'm not,
is.
okay.
So I just don't know if it's in it, if it's not already in the maroon snowmass wilderness. It should be. But that's, it's like where the old Cindy Hubin cabin was.
No, I know the parcel, I don't know where it is
Yeah.
in proximity to the line that's drawn
But
there.
I'm
so-
in support. It makes sense. Have we had any concerns exhibited by people up there? You know, like Mr. Wilcox and
So we weren't able to get this in time, but I did finally get 3 signatures on a support letter here. We can send that digitally, but I also printed it out.
is John on there?
Yeah, we've got John from Ashcroft, and we've got ACES and the Aspen Historical Society are the 3 permit holders up there.
I saw Aces in the Historical Society. I didn't see John. It's pretty critical to have John
Yeah.
on board with this.
Yeah, we worked with them and we went up there and kind of looked over the maps together with Johnny, and we pulled back a section of the proposal to accommodate for a little water infrastructure they
Yeah,
have.
some diverse.
And
And it's not going to affect any of their operations as far as snowmobiles or any of that stuff, right?
right, yeah, we brought it down to just outside the boundary. We put about a 75-foot setback from their permit boundary so that all of their operations can continue. They'll be able to do what they've been doing, and that leaves a little buffer room for if they end up, expanding or moving trails.
Veering
around or
off the
whatever.
track.
Right.
Okay.
Is Francie still with us?
That's
I don't know.
Hard questions. I don't know.
No, wait a minute. It wasn't for you.
Is that your answer for today? I don't know.
She's still there. Okay, just want to make sure she's still on. Any questions, Francie? If she's listening. Kelly? Okay.
No, I'm
sorry.
good. I'm just having a snack, so I took the video off of me.
Okay. Glad you're still there. Kelly, question?
Does this affect the snowmobiling that goes on through the trails that go back into the woods?
No, it stays back from the road. On the printed map, you'll see it's got a 100-foot setback from roads, which is kind of standard for wilderness and wilderness additions. So yeah, the road and the snowmobile routes will be unaffected.
So I thought they went pretty far back, which is,
Yeah,
I'd love their
kinda down
input if
on
that's
that.
problematic, but that's generally not allowed in wilderness. So if we are teeing ourselves up for a conflict, I'd love to avoid that.
Yeah, that's what, I think most of the snowmobiling takes place across the road from Pine Creek, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, they have trails
won't
that
be,
go back
they won't be
into
in
the
there.
woods there. I just don't know if they use that for.
Yeah, that's not, they don't use that for snowmobiling, because I know Pine Creek's been pretty, careful with their permitting and to keep snowmobiles off. They're cross-country ski and foot-powered
Yeah.
and horse-powered at the most, but the horses are on the road.
What
Yeah.
about those
So there's
cabins that
nowhere
are there, though? The cabins that are just upstream from Toklat? I
They're
don't
off the
see those
road.
carved out at all.
Those are off the road or within the permit boundary, which we kept
Avoided.
we
Avoided.
avoided that, yeah.
Because I know you have a little carve out for Toklat, a little carve out for Pine Creek. But I just want to make sure that, because those cabins are set back a little from the road, I just want to make sure that we're not going to have a conflict there with people accessing those.
Yeah, and we double checked that and made sure that the boundary, it seems like all structures are at least 200 feet from
So we're
the
good. I'm
boundary.
sure John would have let you know if it
Yeah, and
hadn't
so
been.
that's, you know, for access, it could also be for fire mitigation or
Okay.
things like that to
Okay.
just make
Just
sure.
want to
we're
make
good
sure
there.
we don't interfere with that. And I'll ask Will, about where the Ryan's, I think the Ryan's further up.
Well, I wanted to say I'm always eagerly supportive. I think this is an appropriate place.
Be right in the middle.
We're not shutting down any roads, we're not shutting down any active trails, we're not limiting anything that's happening there already. What we're doing is finding an appropriate place that probably should have been included in the first place.
Exactly.
So I'm a thumbs up on this.
And we've done the broader public notice, and I'm sure there's another steps to go, so we'll find out. We won't be surprised if we hear from others.
Great, so there was a draft letter in your packet, and
Very simple.
yeah, very simple, straightforward, and if you're comfortable with that, we can move forward.
I haven't been totally following this. Is this also where the Star Peak Wilderness is the other part of Pickens County that is trying to be pulled in? as
Yeah,
well?
so
Okay.
it's the same piece of legislation, the GORP Act, and technically, I think you might be able to see the northern tip of that Star Peak addition in this map if we had put it on there.
Yeah,
It comes,
okay.
just barely comes into the map here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I'm gonna keep us moving. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
I think you got what you came for.
I was kind of excited to see it, and I'll run it by Dale and let you know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I can
Thanks.
get you a copy of this letter, which is going to
Great.
Senator Bennett.
Yeah, it'll go to Francie
Excellent.
for her signature.
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you all.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks.
It was a nice surprise to see that. Okay, board open
Thanks,
discussion.
Michael.
Thanks.
Thanks, Michael.
I have nothing additional.
Anybody?
You got a whole hour to do your open discussion, John.
No, he doesn't.
I thought Greg got
Patty?
I don't have any open discussion other than the wildfire, How to Live with Wildfire documentary is showing tonight at 7:30 at the Wheeler Opera House.
It sounds great. I'm sorry I'm gonna miss it.
I'm gonna run over there, so.
Kelly, open discussion? Francie?
No,
Okay, I've got some. One, I just wanted to revisit our conversation with Open Space last time they were with us, just regarding the Emma store. I came away feeling like we were, or at least I thought we were pretty clear that we were on the fence about the Emma store being repurposed for use by Lift Up. And I got the impression from staff that maybe it wasn't as clear, or maybe there's still a lot of concern. And so that I just want to flag that, because
I didn't say I wasn't for it being used for Lift Up. My thing was more, we had such a great presentation about what Lift Up does. We didn't really have a lot of time to talk about using the Emma store for Lift Up.
Right,
I would
maybe that
like
was
just
it.
more specifics as to what it would mean, traffic, conversion, what services would be offered out of there,
Cost,
et cetera, et
right.
cetera. So
Okay.
that's my biggest thing. And I don't want to, I just remember the long discussion when George was on the board about using that as a bike place where people could get off the trail and have a picnic area. And we want to make sure those community amenities are still included, if Lift Up goes in there or not.
right. No, so I think it's worthy of a longer discussion, not today, but
Yeah.
I share your
No,
concern.
not today.
The other thing I want to bring up is I think that I would like to actively call and convene whether a summit or a meeting, a conference of the district managers and board members of taxing districts in the Roaring Fork Valley to discuss a coordinated effort for property tax credit relief for property owners across the county. I know it's voluntary on the part of the districts. We don't tell them what to do. We don't have control over them. But I think we can convene a summit and have a public conversation about what I understand will be substantial tax increases for property owners. And I'd also like our board, to direct staff to have the treasurer and finance director prepare a report of estimated tax increases for a range of property owners throughout the county, so we really have an understanding based on the current information we have, just so we can eliminate surprises.
Yeah,
Because we don't have all the information yet. We don't know what the actual amounts will be, but I think that it'd be better to be forewarned and understand where things are going in advance, because I know people who are very concerned their taxes could go up, 3 times what they're paying. And that will have a significant impact on middle class and virtually everybody in the community. So I would like to ask us to convene such a meeting, and I would rely on staff to know the appropriate time and to understand what resources would be needed to do that. So that's what I'd like to ask for. Kelly, go ahead.
I don't know, maybe we have a little wires crossed, because I thought our board had already directed staff to be having a conversation related to impacts and potential relief. So I assume there's that I was expecting that to be forthcoming
But
for us.
that was an update, okay.
And then we would sort of decide if it looked formulated correctly from our point of view, that we would then start to talk with other districts about that. But maybe John
I guess
has more.
maybe we can formalize it a little bit more. I didn't hear that, or if I did, I apologize.
Yeah, so the staff is going to be bringing forward a property tax relief program for those on, fixed incomes that meet certain criteria, that sort of thing. And that is a program that we would anticipate we may approach other taxing districts on upon the board's, kind of approval. I had also taken as direction, at least meeting with my peers from some of the larger taxing districts, to talk about not only that proposal, but to make sure that folks are aware of the potential impacts of the assessed value changes and the different tools in addition to a property tax relief program for vulnerable populations, like the temporary mill levy reductions and such. We had not taken it as direction to create a broader summit with boards and that sort of thing. So I had asked Charlotte to reach out with at least to my peers, and then we are bringing a property tax relief program for those on fixed that meet certain criteria, income criteria, fixed income, that sort of thing.
Great.
Back to this board.
This was outside of that. We already, my understanding is we're already working on that. This was way back. We talked about maybe doing a letter when we had more information and sending it out to the boards of the school district and the hospital district and the fire district, and just saying, but
There are 51 districts. So.
yeah, but but starting with the big boys and working down to the little ones, and we can do our own with the ambulance district and with open space and trails. They need to have some financial information to see where their budgets are going to go, and Ann was going to. I think Ann mentioned that right now we don't really have any idea what the mill levy is going to be. So they're still collecting that information, but I think we could, rather than just send them a letter when they're going to say, we don't know yet. We don't know yet what our budgets are going to be. We don't know what the mill levy is going to be. I think we need to be prepared to send something out as soon as we have more information to contact them. And if John can already, kick it off by opening that door of conversation, then we could follow it up with a letter to all of the entities that have a board, which they should. And just ask them to review their financials for the next 2 years and look at what they can do to help provide some relief. Because, Twining Flats District, they're already running short. So, there's probably going to be their decision because they only tax their own little homeowners association. So they're all very different than the broader spectrum ones that tax, the larger districts like school and ambulance. So I think that's kind of more what we were asking for at the time.
My only concern about, and we are doing some modeling that we're going to bring to you for that property tax relief program, for example.
So
And the
that'll have that info
challenge,
in it?
yeah, the challenge that we're running into, of course, is that if we model based on existing mill levies and increases in assessed value, that's going to be alarming. That's what's scaring people right now. But that is not likely what's going to happen across all 51 districts. For example, you know, we will be making changes, CMC will be making change, and we don't know what some districts are going to be doing yet. And that's part of the purpose of me convening with some of my peers, just to get a sense of where folks are at.
When you say your peers, are you talking about other county managers, or are you talking about district managers?
Yeah.
Who are we talking about?
Yeah, well, like,
Who are your peers, John?
like
You're peerless.
Well, I
Like
would-
Dave Russell, and
the superintendent
John
and
Ward.
municipal managers, that sort of thing.
I would just like to ask that it become more of a public forum in which this happens, because naturally everyone looks toward us because we're public figures and we're in the fishbowl. But the 51 districts have boards and, you know, concerns that we don't even know about yet. When the taxes go up, they're going to be looking at us. And I just think now's a good time for all the districts to be accountable to their citizenry and be a little bit more public about what they're thinking. And maybe we can help them do that. You know, there's got to be an organized way we can do it, just to try to relieve the amount of, I'm not going to say panic, but concern in the community regarding this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't want to do something too soon and then lead them in a direction that they're not going to be headed.
That's where
and they're going
we
to say,
rely on
oh, we're going
staff.
to get this huge tax relief, and then when it turns out at the end of the day and the mill levy's X and budgets come in and their budgets are here and they're not going to get that tax relief. So I think we need to be careful in misleading them in the other direction.
I just think there's just some sensitivities. Like, providing information is one thing. You know, I think making an ask of the districts is a little bit different, because we haven't even
We can't ask them.
figured out what
What
we're
we're gonna
willing
do.
to do. You know, so I just think there need, like, I thought that the treasurer had information, I can't find it right now, but about all of the contact info for the district reps and things like that people have access to sort of inquire.
They do. They have a whole list.
Yeah, anyway, so I just have concerns about how we would do something like that.
And I think when the time is right, it does need to be public, so the public knows that we have been reaching out, and these are our efforts when we maybe do more discussion about the relief program.
And again, if Prop HH passes, this is how much
Yeah.
this is going to be affected. And
Yeah, we
so
don't want
there's
to get
just
too
it's
far
a lot
ahead
of
that,
scenario
but
planning.
I think Greg's right. We need to let the public know we're thinking about it, and that it's not something that we haven't heard, and we've been listening to them.
Right. To be proactive is probably a good thing. Francie?
Yeah, so when will we know about what the tax increase will be, what time of year? And I have a couple of people who told me that Garfield, they've already gotten their taxes. How is that possible?
They get an estimated approximate tax. That doesn't mean that that's part of, they do the long form, Kelly, is that what you called it? And they do, it's kind of a guesstimate, rather than wait and do the more accurate.
And so, yeah, so that's an estimate of taxes, Francie, and typically you don't see the types of jumps in assessed value, obviously, that we've seen. And so those estimates tend to be fairly accurate this far out. They may be challenged this year because they're going to show, I think, going up maybe even more than they actually will. Here's the challenge: is mill levies don't get set until the end of the year. You know, most public entities are
December.
working on a budget calendar where budgets need to be proposed in mid-October, approved mid-December, and final mill levies are set to support those budgets that third week in December, right before the holidays there. And you know, some districts are trying to get out with commitments right now, say, hey, we're going to look at our mill levies in these ways. And that's certainly something that you can do, but I think a lot of districts are probably not going to be fully into that until they're farther along in their budget planning. And so, we won't really know for sure, Francie, what that is until mill levies are certified. And all those mill levies do come to this board. It's usually right around December 21st, 22nd.
On top of the election.
But the person one of the people who's talked to me in Garfield has said that their form that they got from Garfield County said their taxes went from 5,000 to 10,000.
Well,
And
that
how
is
is that possible with Tabor?
That's not accurate yet. That's the problem I think right now is that is probably based on existing mill levies and the change in assessed value. Because of Tabor, right? And you're going to have some jurisdictions that are debruced, that don't have those Tabor restrictions. In fact, Garfield County, I believe, is fully debruced in their general fund and on property taxes, which, I think was a result of oil and gas affecting their assessed value so much and having that variability in their assessed value was a way for them to stabilize. And so, but they're making commitments, it sounds like, to be really looking closely at their mill levy. And so if that's the case, it's likely that, the mill levy on the long form won't be what the final mill levy is. And so my sense is a lot of the long forms right now are probably overestimating the amount of tax that will be paid.
So they'll be getting happy surprises down there.
Well, you just have to, just because you can collect all that doesn't mean a district will collect all that.
That's better put, yes.
And shorter.
And for some districts, you can't collect, your number won't be as high because you just can't go up that high.
And typically, assessed valuations have changed within generally the framework of what mill levies can or can't go. And so the long form in that more stable environment is somewhat accurate, probably within 5% plus or minus.
This year, on top of the ballot questions, we don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah, and this year is a lot more challenging because I know there's probably been a period where values have changed this much, but I know I haven't seen it over the last 2 decades. So,
yeah. Okay, well, that was.
You have more, Greg?
That's all I have for now.
Future agendas?
Can move on to future agendas if
I have
that ends
one
that.
thing, but I can deal with it with Charlotte as far as the ACRA meeting. I just want to make sure we don't schedule executive sessions if, we do them on every Tuesday and ACRA meetings are Tuesdays. So I'll run it by Charlotte.
And John.
And John. I'll run it by all the powers that be. Because if they schedule it at 10 o'clock, I will be late. And if they schedule it at 9, I'll miss the whole thing.
And actually, Julia would probably be the one.
Yeah, I'll let them know.
Only thing I had actually, Greg, I think you had asked for 30 to 45 minutes on October 3rd to hear from Safe Passages.
Safe Passages,
I
yep.
don't know if you wanted to talk about that.
Safe Passages Roaring Fork is the group that convened about 9 months ago regarding wildlife migration routes and crossings. And in the last period of time, they've organized and have a board of directors, a substantial membership, and they've raised funding to do studies based on the watershed biodiversity study to actually look at where we see the greatest or most critical areas for wildlife crossings. And they've asked to come and present their findings to us on October 3rd. So
wasn't Perry Will's bill Safe Passages? What was his bill?
He was part of that, I think.
He's been meeting
he
with
helped
people.
fund that with CDOT, and he's been supporting this. Will Roush and Tom Cardamone are behind this, and they've been doing a study. They raised the money to pay for the funding for a fairly comprehensive study, which they want to bring to the board and talk to us about in October 3rd.
So, and that is Pickens County Cares Day, so we'll have a limited window, so we'll see
So-
if they're available, if the board's.
Yeah, half an hour, 45 minutes max, I think, because if they have a presentation, it may take a little bit longer, but I don't know what else happens that day.
That's a long day with Pickens County Cares.
Well, that's in the morning, right? We usually do that in the morning, and then it doesn't go all
We do
day. Didn't take all day
Lunch.
this year.
Took a morning and then lunch.
Yeah.
So that's it for me.
I'm gonna be in Bailey or someplace in Colorado around that time of year.
I would love for us to find a few minutes in the next 2 weeks. We have to submit CCI priority suggestions by July 7th. So we can just put a few, it can be open discussion, but maybe call it out so y'all can come thinking about what you want to do.
You know
Now
what?
overturning 1255.
How, did you get a form yet from them?
Nah,
That always-
maybe via email.
If you got a form, if you send it on to it, then I have it.
Oh.
You know me.
And I'm digging in further, but the RET, did I tell you the RET?
You told me about
fee? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be going down to Denver here, and I'm gonna try and set up a meeting with Jenny when I go. I'm going down for a doctor's appointment, so I thought I'd try and swing by.
Makes me wonder, can we put a RET fee on our ballot if they were allowed to put it on their ballot?
A fee, not a fee. It's a fee.
Yeah.
And there are areas that have them.
We also received a letter today. I think it was a letter originally from Martha Ferguson and now Sierra Flanagan sending one just regarding a Dark Skies initiative in Snowmass Cap Creek Caucus is supporting it. And I know this has come up before, and I thought we'd already done
Steve was
this.
supposed to bring us back more information on it.
Okay, so
It's not
we
an
have a
easy
letter.
process to do, I found out. It's rather lengthy, and we had looked into it years ago with Dorothea Ferris, and I don't know where it actually got us.
I thought we already had some restrictions that might satisfy
Me
that.
too.
We actually
did it
have,
last
our
year.
lighting code is more strict probably than the Dark Skies Initiative.
And there is some work happening on the lighting code, so we
Yeah.
can maybe,
Great. I forwarded it to Suzanne and Leslie, not knowing who else, and you, not knowing who else to send it to. Well, that's it. We're actually 5 minutes ahead of
No,
schedule.
Greg, I'm very impressed.
Is
Good
there
job.
something else you
Francie, we
want?
missed you.
Hang in there, Francie. Hope you're doing all right.
Thank you.
Let's get that sooner than later.
Are we done?
We are done.
Thank you all.
I'll let you know how
Thanks for the
wildfire
day.
goes. I gotta
And
go home and
we'll see you next time.
manage the dog before I go.